it up, by the way, after we.
I'd like to get started. Oh, am I here? Hello, 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 hello. I get to use my grandfather's gavel. Yes, this is my grandfather's gavel from, I don't know, the 40s. All right, let's get started. We'll call meeting to order April 20th, 2023. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Could we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Brightcoff?
Here?
I'm sorry, Chairperson Brightcoff.
Oh, still here?
Commissioner Blaylock? Here. Commissioner Dodds? Here. Commissioner Gratiter? Here. Commissioner Levin? Here. Commissioner Rothbart?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. The next item is the approval of the minutes from the March 16th, 2023 Plan Commission meeting. I will entertain a motion to approve those minutes, and then we can discuss. All right, Sherry? And seconded? All right, any discussion of the minutes? Changes, comments? All right, well, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, the minutes are approved. Do we have any visitors wishing to address the Plan Commission other than the Lexington matter? I don't see any. All right, then we will turn to, if you want to talk about Lexington, okay, thank you. Anybody who wants to talk about a non-Lexington topic? Okay, thank you. Then we can turn to old business, which is the continuation of the public hearing for 3750 Deerfield Road, the Federal Life property. Bruce, do you have some comments?
I do. Welcome, everybody. As you know, this proposal from Lexington has been before the Plan Commission for months. And when we originally published for the hearing, the zoning relief that was requested included a PUD, a plan development, and some zoning changes, and also relief from some of the other ordinances of the village. As the site plan evolved, the plan changed, and the nature of the relief that the petitioner needed was greatly reduced. And so in order to properly convey the sense of the relief that's requested, we republished notice in the Deerfield Review, in the Daily Herald, the Lake County Daily Herald, on March 23rd. And we remailed notice to the owners within 300 feet of the property in accordance with the village code. The nature of the relief that was mentioned in the notice that was published is on the agenda to some extent, is that the Plan Commission will consider the amended application of Lexington Homes, in which the applicant is seeking approval of amendments to section 9-4A-3 of the village code regarding the determination of the bulk regulations to be applied to multiple family housing development in the 1R 42,000 square foot single family residential district. The next item of relief is the reclassification and zoning of the property to the 1R district. And the last item was a special use permit for multiple family housing pursuant to sections 9-11-9 and 9-4A-3 of the village code. So to just remind everyone here, including the Plan Commission, what is being requested, the existing village code in the 1R district allows for multiple family housing as a special use, but has archaic language, in my judgment, describing some of the ways in which the approval can be given by the board. It can basically vary a number of factors in considering a multiple family housing special use. The amendment before the Plan Commission would clarify some of that language, but basically retain the concept that multiple family housing remains a special use in the 1R zoning district. The second item of relief then is to reclassify, that would be a text amendment to the zoning code. The second item would be to reclassify the property in question, which is now occupied by Federal Life Insurance Company, to the 1R district. And the next item of relief would be to recommend the granting of a special use permit for multiple family housing in that district, in the 1R district, with the bulk regulations and other site criteria to be determined by the board as set forth in the text amendment. So knowing that we were going to republish and send out notices again, we, at the last Plan Commission meeting, we considered some of the new aspects of the site plan. There have been some additional changes. The developer is here with a PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to take you through all of the changes and drawings. And then it'll be time for the Plan Commission to consider next steps after that. Any questions from the Plan Commission? Okay.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, members of the Commission, ladies and gentlemen. Again, my name is Hal Frank. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Meltzer, Pertil, and Stell, and I'm pleased to be before you again on behalf of Lexington Homes. As the village attorney just indicated, we're here to present responses to comments that were made or questions that were asked at the last public hearing session, and to share with you again some of the refinements that have been made over time to the proposal to construct the townhomes and the other site improvements on the property that we've discussed. So again, the main point of our presentation this evening is to provide you with the information that was requested, and obviously we're open to entertaining additional questions from you and from the public as we do that. So if I could begin, I'm going to just walk through a couple of slides to refresh everyone's recollection as to what we're doing here. Here's the slide that is now before the Plan Commission for the development that is now before the Plan Commission for consideration. As you know, it calls for 54 townhome units on the property, which is a conforming density. There's no request for density relief, which there was in the beginning of this process with the initial application, which, as you know, contemplated the construction of 69 townhomes on the property. And our request for relief did ask for the village to amend their zoning ordinance to allow for the grant of density relief. Well, that is no longer the case. So this is the plan that is currently before you, and you'll see on the right the site data, what we call the site data. This is in reference to what the village attorney just referred to under your zoning ordinance. It says when you do a multifamily housing project, the bulk regulations, certain bulk regulations are already provided for to be determined by the village. And so what we've asked is to amend that language to broaden it actually, and just say that all the bulk regulations that will be applicable to a multifamily housing development in the 1R district will be as established by the village board after getting your recommendation. So that's what you see on the right side of this slide. Yard requirements, building separations, etc. Next slide, please. One of the other things that has come out of several conversations with representatives of the village and the village consultants is improved pedestrian access in and around the proposed community. And so we thought we didn't really focus on this at the last presentation. So we thought we'd highlight again for you the internal circulation walks, the walks along the walk along the proposed road connection that the village is seeking to Colonial Court, the connection to the sidewalk on Deerfield Road, and which I believe will be part of the improvements that will be built by the county ultimately on Deerfield Road. And I think you may recall that at the last public hearing session, we had a bigger aerial that showed how this fit in and connected this entire development and walkway system to the larger area all the way to the river and beyond. Next slide, please. So here's one of the slides that here's some of the information, one of the pieces of information we were asked to provide. So that is, how does the impervious area of the proposed community compare, and the proposed conditions compare to what is on the site right now with the federal light building. And you can see that of the 9.5 acre site, basically today there's about 2.5 acres, 2.4 acres of impervious surface, and 6.2 of pervious. Under the proposed conditions, the impervious goes to 3.4. The pervious is 4.8 acres. So all in all, you can see the difference here, and keep in mind that some of the impervious area that you see here, because you see how it is increasing, is related to and caused by the construction of the road, the connecting road from Deerfield Road to Colonial Court. Next slide, please. This is another question that was raised at the last meeting. We had previously presented to you a projection of students that would be generated by the 69 unit original development plan. We had never updated that. And so we did ask our consultant at Johnson Research Group to crunch some new numbers and do a projection of students that are likely to be estimated to be generated by the 54 unit plan. And as you can see, the projection is that there would be 5 students basically generated for the elementary school district and 3 for the high school district. At this point, and again, this is responsive to some questions that were asked at the last. No, that was good. You were good. Thank you. There was questions raised at the last meeting, the last hearing session about the site lighting, and so we have prepared this slide to share with you. And I'm going to turn the floor over to Nate Weinsman from Lexington to address this one.
Hi, good evening. Nate Weinsman with Lexington Homes. I've got a couple things that I want to touch on, but we wanted to get some information here tonight that would be responsive, as Hal said, to previous questions that were raised. This particular exhibit is in response to a question was raised about lighting on site. The simple answer, I think, to our lighting plan is that we will meet the ordinance and code of the village, which involves some specifications specifically to downlighting, dark sky codes. I'm not a lighting expert, so I can't really get into the particulars of that. It is very specific in the code, and we will follow that. Specifically, we will have coach lights as exhibited here in this illustration, 1 per garage, and also a coach light, 1 per front entry. And then the triangles on this exhibit depict where the street lights will be located, 4 on the access drive and 2 internal to the boulevard or looping cul-de-sac there. Next exhibit. This again, it was just an update of a previous exhibit on the parking, illustrating 2 garage spaces, 2 driveway spaces, and then dedicated guest parking spaces. One of the review requests was made of us that came up either at the last meeting or subsequent to the last meeting through your planner was to, in addition to address some of his and your concerns about pedestrian circulation, which Hal touched on, was the parking and also dedicated areas for deliveries. As we all know, that's become more and more of a daily routine, is to have deliveries made. And so this plan, if you really drill down on it, has 3 dedicated areas within the internal circulation for delivery type trucks, the typical Amazon and so forth. Next slide, please. This was also in addition to, or in response to, just a general question raised. What does this look like, this plan overlaid against the existing? We showed a side-by-side earlier of the impervious versus pervious, of existing versus proposed. What is outlined in white here is the boundary of the property, and then the general layout of the streets and buildings as they overlay on the existing FedLife, which is predominantly their building, which is the larger white pair of squares there in the middle. So we do have a portion of our buildings along Deerfield overlap where the building exists. And then the buildings on the north side are all within basically the parking and drive areas. I think the parking lot, probably our setbacks are a minimum of 108 feet and wider towards the west side. The parking lot, I think, comes within less than 100 feet maybe of the property as you look at this aerial photo. Next slide, please. This exhibit is really all about what's shown on the bottom of the exhibit, and it is a comparison of height. This was in response to another question that was asked. What are the heights of these buildings as at what will be a new finished grade versus the existing grade and existing building? So this is an overlay exhibit that shows the cross section of a couple of our buildings in relation to the height of the existing FedLife building. Essentially, they're identical in height, but there will be, as we talked about in previous meetings, some change to the grade as it relates to the flood zone. Next slide. With that, flood zone is a good point to turn it over to our engineer. And we want to touch on some of the questions that have been raised about drainage, stormwater management, flood zone in the area, and how this project will intertwine with those things. So with that, I'll turn it over to Todd.
Good evening. My name is Todd Schaefer. I'm a principal with Hager Engineering, 100 East State Parkway, Schaumburg, Illinois. This first slide is in response to some comments from the last meeting about the flooding on the site in the north area of Riverwoods. And what this shows is the FEMA, which is the federal flood maps, that shows that there is significant flooding, zone AEs and floodway, in the vicinity of the site, including the Meadow Lake subdivision. On the FedLife site itself, the parking lot is the low point. And as Mr. Hoover pointed out, we do need to raise the site for those buildings to conform with current code for Lake County stormwater management and flood protection elevations. As part of that, we will have to provide what we call compensatory storage, which goes into additional stormwater management that we need to provide. And as you can see on this map, the western part of our site is also occupied by floodplain. And so this in combination with the Deerfield Road plans, our proposed stormwater management system needs to account for the existing conditions, the proposed conditions for our site where we're adding impervious area, but also the Deerfield Road, portions of the Deerfield Road improvements from a standpoint of stormwater management in the form of detention and compensatory storage. If you can go to the next slide, please. So this is just an overview to show the existing conditions, what is tributary to our site, and what is tributary to the adjacent areas. As you can see in this exhibit, it's a large area. It's over 20 acres. And if you look along our north property line, that's the woodland area. And there's a dashed line delineating what currently goes north into Meadow Lake. And in that area, that's part of the woodland protection area. And we're not proposing any grading within those areas. The only thing we're proposing is to do a meandering wood chip path conforming to existing grades and cleaning up some underbrush to accommodate that woodland path. Along the eastern property line, there is water that does discharge directly to the east, but the majority of the water goes through the existing pond in the southwest corner, which takes in water from the south side of Deerfield Road as well as Colonial Shops. That then is conveyed through a storm sewer, a 24-inch pipe, which is the dashed red line that goes from the pond to the northeast corner. From that northeast corner, it goes into an existing drainage ditch that goes east into the Des Plaines River. So a key point that I want to make, just from a point of reference perspective, is the water is conveyed from the existing pond through a 24-inch sewer. When that water hits that 24-inch sewer, it's reduced to a 6-inch restrictor, which is a very small restrictor. Call it think of a 14-inch softie going through a hole. And then it overflows and goes to the east. So if you go to the next slide, the next slide is showing the proposed conditions. The drainage area upstream that's tributary to us is consistent, but what we're taking in from a standpoint of water is the additional impervious area from our site, the additional impervious area for Deerfield Road project. But the general drainage is the same. We have a storm sewer from the south side of Deerfield Road coming into our site. And instead of a storm sewer going through the site to the northeast property, water is going through the 2 stormwater management basins. And that's going to provide a BMP, the best management practice, to help filter water from the roadway before it goes downstream in the Des Plaines River. From the northwest basin, there's going to be a large diameter storm sewer based on the plans we submitted to the village. It's currently at a 42-inch diameter. So the existing is 24. Proposed right now is 42. And we are taking that into an outlet control structure. So to not bore you, there is an outlet control structure. The village is reviewing our proposed conditions, drainage report, and existing conditions. If you go to the next slide, one of the key things that was brought up by the Plan Commission, as well as some of the neighbors, is the overland flow route. And what you're looking at the top is basically the area between our buildings. So we're at 108 feet south of the north property line and the woodland protection area. And within that, we are creating the 42-inch pipe, which conveys water below grade. And in the event of something happens with that 42-inch pipe, then water will go via overland flow through the ditch that we're creating and get to the same point at the northeast corner. This water is not going to go north into Meadow Lake. From a standpoint of the only water that's anticipated to go to Meadow Lake is the existing drainage that currently goes to Meadow Lake, so the undisturbed land. At the bottom is the outlet control structure. It's there if anybody wants to ask questions about it. I won't go into bore you with details. Can you go to the next slide, please? So these are just some numbers, but in general, I'm not going to go through the numbers. I'm just going to go into the major components of it. When we did our existing conditions drainage study, one of the key points is what is the water surface elevation of the existing pond in the southwest corner? And we determined that elevation from the standpoint of the numbers 641.95. I'm sorry, is that's the 2-year elevation. So the existing conditions, existing peak elevation is 643.97. Let's call it 644. The BFE, base flood elevation, from the standpoint of FEMA, varies from 645.3 to 645.0. That is due to a backup of water from the Des Plaines River. Our site, including Deerfield Road, is going to peak much sooner than the Des Plaines River peaks. And then the area experiences a backwater effect. So as part of our analysis, we are required to maintain the existing conditions, high water elevation, under proposed conditions. And the only way to do that is to provide stormwater management or storage below that elevation. And based on the report that we submitted, our proposed water elevation at this time is 2 inches lower than the existing conditions. So we have some flexibility with regards to the proposed conditions for improvements to the adjacent areas. We're also decreasing the discharge, what we call the critical duration events, for the 2-year, 100-year events to all areas adjacent to the site, including the water is being held back for longer periods of time to slowly discharge further downstream. So ultimately, this project is going to bring a stormwater management benefit to not only our site, but also the surrounding area. Go to the next slide, please. With that, I'll turn it over to Sharon Dixon, our landscape architect.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sharon Dixon. I am the principal and lead landscape architect at Dixon Design Studio. On the screen before you tonight is a rendered landscape plan, which depicts our landscape design for our community named Riverwoods Reserve. For this site, we learned that the property had a delineated woodland along our north, approximately 1.29 acres, and that the village code mandated that we preserve at least 80% of this delineated woodland. And that is what we've done. Our current plan, our proposal for 59 new townhome units, preserves 80.6% of that delineated woodland along the north. Constructing the northwest stormwater basin and the overland flow route running along the north of our northernmost buildings, 1 through 6, does facilitate the need for some tree removals within this delineated woodland. In total, we will be removing 26 of those protected trees in order to accommodate the design for the stormwater management and the overland flow route. The woodland area to remain will remain as is, except for the introduction of a mulched wood chip path that meanders through that woodland in order to activate the space. This path is then connected by 2 footbridges on the east and west ends that then travels south and connects into the pedestrian sidewalks throughout the community. The 2 basins on our site will be planted with native forbs and grasses, and they will have some open water areas. The native plants will spill into and out of that basin, creating a nice meandering and undulating edge. The native forbs and grasses will also cover the side slopes to be fully naturalized. These basins will be installed and maintained by a village certified contractor, ecological contractor, and managed in perpetuity by the Homeowners Association of Riverwoods Reserve. Another natural area we've incorporated into this design is that of a rain garden, and that's located in the middle of the site, an internal boulevard. This area will collect the runoff and rainwater from the surrounding roadway and be diverted into the central space, which will then filter the water and absorb some of the rainwater before it's released elsewhere. This area will also be incorporated with native plants. While the woodland and the basins have a naturalistic feel, the rest of the community will be a more manicured landscape. Now, that still means we can use native plants and native our plant species within our manicured landscape. We've created an open lawn area north of Building 4 for recreation, perhaps a great place to throw a frisbee or lay down a blanket for an outdoor picnic. There's an overlook area in the southeast corner of the north basin. This overlook will be designed with decorative paving, an arbor with nestled seating benches underneath, lush landscaping, and some decorative stone accent pieces. We have 3 courtyard spaces between the buildings that are paired. These areas are nestled with landscape material and also are delineated with their entrance with the decorative arbor that speaks to the architecture of the buildings and brings that out into the landscape. We've located one ground sign for the community. It is in the southeast corner of the internal access road. This is a sign that will be double-sided. It will have the same materials that we use in the buildings. It will also have lush landscaping surrounding it and the same decorative stone features that are located at the overlook and the eastern central seating area. That eastern central seating area has a seawall, a couple more benches. It's nestled between slight berm to kind of nestle the area from the roadway, create more of a private space, and then obviously has some nice trees in the foreground and background of that area. Every crosswalk throughout the development will be treated with a decorative pavement. This helps in aiding pedestrian safety and also adds an additional layer of interest to the community. Decorative fencing will flank the entrances of every motor court. These fence runs will offer additional architectural interest and also aid in screening vehicles in the motor courts. No other fencing is proposed for our development. Lastly, there's a berm along Deerfield Road. It's an intensive landscape buffer intended to screen the site and offer a streetscape to Deerfield Road. This berm will include trees, shrubs, perennials, and ornamental grasses, along with continuing the stone accents to add cohesiveness to the rest of the development. Next slide, please. The next three slides are computer-generated models of our proposed project post-construction. These were presented at our last meeting, but we thought we'd share three just to refresh everyone's memory. View 1 is looking southeast. Next slide. View 6 is looking east along our internal boulevard. Next slide. View 16 is looking northwest along Deerfield Road. We were then asked to prepare some 3D renderings of what our site will look like post-construction in terms of our neighbors to the north, Meadow Lake, as they look south to our site. The yellow box indicates our site, the perimeter border of our site. The blue cross indicates the position of the camera person, and then the blue arrow is the direction you're looking. So this first view is an existing shot of the bend in the road at Chicory, which is basically off the northeast corner of our site. And you can see the top slide. You can go next slide, please. This is that existing view a little larger. So you can see some lawn, you can see the existing woodland and underbrush, and then you can also see federal life in the distance. This shot was taken in early April of this month, and so you can see the vegetation has not fully leafed out yet. So we're considering this the worst case scenario. This is the winter look. This is, 5 to 6 months of the year. Next slide, please. This is now that same view with our proposed buildings superimposed in their current location as depicted on the site plan. You can still see the vegetation in front, the lawn, and the buildings behind. Next slide, please. So to be fully transparent, obviously in the winter, there's more exposure. In the summer, we have quite an influx of vegetation that fills in. This was taken directly from Google Street View, so we feel we believe it has a higher accuracy of actual vegetation coverage. And you can just get a little peek of some of the buildings behind, but for the most part, it provides a very nice landscape screen between us and Meadow Lake. Next slide, please. So the other view we're presenting tonight is from Foxtail Court, in particular the homeowners at 1 Foxtail Court. We were allowed to go on their property, so that blue cross, the camera person is standing on their back pool deck, looking directly south. Next slide, please. This is a blown up view of the existing conditions. So this is what was photographed in early April this month. You can see the treetops, a couple evergreens, mostly deciduous material, and then you definitely can see life behind that existing woodland. Next slide. So this is our site superimposed behind that woodland in the accurate location as presented in the site plan. You do get a view of the buildings. Next slide, please. But once again, half the year we would have some coverage with foliage. Now this view, we did have to take our best guess at what that foliage would cover. And so we added some foliage and leaves to the treetops, underbrush, and we feel for the most part it provides significant screening for our project between us and Needle Lake. Next slide, please. We were also asked to provide some information about plant material. We have previously submitted a full preliminary landscape plan. This plan presented locations of specific plant material, but did not call out specific species of plant material. That will happen if we move forward with final plans. But tonight I wanted to put together some slides that to give you a flavor of what that plant material would involve. This is not in any way capturing every plant species we might use on the property, but gives you a good sampling of what could be present. Unfortunately, the slide obliterated some of my highlighting, but some of the trees for canopy and understory, and then one tree on the next side in evergreens is found in the woodlands of River Woods. So we're using natives, nativars, and some non-natives. This slide is for a smattering of evergreen trees we might be using on the site. White pine is the native evergreen for River Woods, and that's the top square. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So all proposed landscaping will be conducive to our climate zone. It will offer multiple seasons of interest. It will include a diversity of plant species, sizes, textures, bloom times, and colors. Next slide, please. All plants will be selected for quality, long-term sustainability, disease resistance, desired growth habits. Next slide, please. Proposed plant material will enhance the overall development and building architecture. It will be carefully and purposely sited, taking into consideration window locations, pedestrian travel, vehicular screening, and visibility, both for aesthetics and safety. And with that, I will thank you for the presentation tonight. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Sharon. Two final items I'd like to touch on. One is we were asked to submit an updated traffic impact memorandum that was submitted by KLOA Inc. It basically addressed the fact that the number of units had dropped from 69 to 54. That, as you may recall, there was a second access point originally proposed on the southeast corner of the property. That was eliminated, and so KLOA was asked to assess the impact of the elimination of that access drive and the reduction in density and how that would affect both on-site traffic circulation. And the plan, as you see before you, internal circulation was not originally contemplated. So KLOA was asked to evaluate impact on the surrounding roadways, the adequacy of parking, and the ability of fire trucks to safely navigate the internal road there. And so that was submitted with the conclusions that there would be no adverse impact on the surrounding roadways, and that the parking would be adequate, and that the fire trucks could adequately make turns here. The other item I wanted to address is we were asked to give some further thought to the proposal to provide affordable housing in the community. As you may recall from our application, we are proposing to provide 3 on-site affordable for-sale units and make a in-lieu payment for 5 other units for a total of $625,000, which we believe the village could use in conjunction with other monies, state, county, maybe federal monies, to create even more affordable housing units in the village. We submitted some form sample agreements that have been used in Highland Park to ensure that those units remain occupied by income qualified families. There's this, we provided a form of a declaration of restrictions, a special form of warranty deed, a special form of bill of sale, and some other documents like a form of subordinate mortgage, all of which Highland Park is used, and actually our communities have used to ensure that units that are set up to be occupied by income qualified families remain such. And so that issue is going to require further discussion with the village board. ultimately, but obviously they're going to be looking for your input on that issue, as are we. So with that, we'll conclude our presentation and again entertain any new questions you might have or additional questions. And we thank you.
Okay, Plan Commissioners, questions? Sherry?
See if I can make this thing work. Is it on? Okay. There are a couple of issues. I think one of my primary issues was that in earlier iterations of this development, there was a fence that protected Meadow Lake from the residents of this townhouse complex. I don't see that on this map. Is it still there?
I'm not sure what you mean by prior iterations showing protections. There's never been any fencing shown. And it's our
Yes, there was.
and it's our position that fencing wouldn't be putting in fencing wouldn't make sense. We understand the concern. We're happy to talk about how we might be able to address the concern that's been expressed by Meadow Lake residents about people living here or kids living here and wandering into Meadow Lake. And we're happy to talk about ways that we can work together to minimize that from happening. But number one, we don't think putting a fence in would be consistent with the village's goals with respect to the woodland protection area. And number two, I don't think you could build a fence that would actually ultimately and finally keep people from going to Meadow Lake, which I think was recognized in one of the letters.
Well, yeah, there was a fence originally, because I know we talked about kids jumping the fence and we talked about the edges of the fence. It was originally talked about. My concern is, and I think a lot of the residents of Meadow Lake are concerned with the fact, and especially with this lovely mulch path, which I think is absolutely delightful, very frankly, it brings the residents and especially the kids right up to that wooded barrier and into Meadow Lake. And Meadow Lake has two lakes, which are an attractive nuisance to kids, and the residents have every right to be concerned that kids are going to go in and somebody's going to fall in, and it may be a danger.
Let me ask you a question, Sherry, because I don't like to use the words attractive nuisance too.
Okay,
freely.
it's not an attractive nuisance, but kids are going to want to hit it.
Because after all, there's detention right now on Federal Life, and there will be new detention areas. And I wouldn't want to suggest that they all have to be fenced off. In fact, most liability risk management people will say it's probably better not to pretend that you're going to be able to fence off all your detention. So there's a lot of detention area here. There are a couple of issues with the fence that I'd like to just point out, and then the Plan Commission can take it up. One is, it's never been discussed where the fence would go, but if the fence were to go on the north boundary line of the property, it would close off the woodland from all of the Meadow Lake residents.
And it's true, and we don't want that.
Right. Well,
We
no
don't
one
want
ever
that.
suggested that the landowner is going to bring the fence 100 feet back on their own property. So you end up either with a fence on the property line, which is probably to no one's advantage. It wouldn't be that attractive for the people living there to look at, I would imagine. Then the other thing I'm relating some comments from the village planner, and I'd ask all of us to think about, pedestrian linkage is a two-way street. So I understand the concern about children going that one way, but for example, would people in Meadow Lake appreciate the ability to come onto that path and walk to the shopping center? In other words, would
Yeah, I
they?
haven't looked at it from that side, and you're absolutely correct.
I mean, in other words, there's two-way, possibilities here. And one of the conditions that I have a note to ask the developer about, to ask the Plan Commission about and to ask the residents about, some developments are made with stipulations that they not have a fence, that they allow for passage. I would want to be able to say that people who live in Meadow Lake can get from Meadow Lake to the shopping center making use of these paths. That's something to think about. We haven't discussed it, but I just feel like from the planning perspective, having people be able to move back and forth is usually considered an advantage from pedestrian linkage standpoint, but so anyway, for example, in all of Thorngate, we mandated that there's no fence around Thorngate for that reason. So, I'm just pointing out that these are other planning considerations, but I'd invite you to think about, if you had a fence.
And I think that you're right, except on the other hand, I do understand the concerns that I've gotten from a lot of people in Meadow Lake who say, we don't want a bunch of strangers, kids on bicycles on our streets. We don't want a bunch of strangers, kids getting to the ponds, because Meadow Lake makes its ponds accessible as swimming areas, which these detention areas aren't. So there is an attraction to it. And I understand that concern. I don't know what we can do to ameliorate it, but this is something we have to look at. And taking that one step further, is there now a screen at the end of the motor courts that face Meadow Lake so that when the cars come in, their headlights aren't going into, because that was there at one point too, I believe, and I don't see it now.
I don't want to just keep it down.
Yes, there would be landscape screening. There's both hardscape and landscape at the entry to the motor courts, and then landscape screening in addition to the.
Will it be tall enough and dense enough to?
Yes.
Headlights.
Yeah, I would. I defer to your planner and your arborist in their final review of our construction drawings, but that is the intent. Yes.
And if I could go back, Griffin, to one of the earlier slides that we had, excuse me, the slide that Nate Weinsman talked about right in the beginning, that overlaid the proposed development on top of the existing development. If you notice, yep, keep going, next one. Nope, there you go. If you notice, right now you have exactly the area that you're talking about, Commissioner. You have the expanse of the entire parking lot and cars pulling in there with the woodland. I don't think at the end of that parking lot there's any additional screening.
But Mr. Frank, the difference is that when it was a commercial building, people came in the morning and left at dinner time. And now you're talking about people coming home at night.
That's true.
That's the difference. And that's.
But in the winter
my
months,
big
I can't believe
concern
there
is,
weren't people getting in their car and turning their lights on.
I have to tell you that I am impressed with what you've done. I am. But I think maybe we have to look a little more carefully, and that's why I'm lighting your fires.
That's fine. And if I could just add one last comment, the piggyback on what the village attorney was saying about the fence. Even without talking to my client, in all the many years I've done this, I've never had a home builder or developer client say they're not willing to put up a fence if the community wanted a fence. I believe the issue is I don't think it's a cost issue. It's the issue that we think fencing is inconsistent with Riverwoods. We think putting up a fence is inconsistent with your woodland protection ordinance. But at the end of the day, I really think this is an issue for the Plan Commission and the village board to work out.
Well, but the Plan Commission has to be comfortable that you guys are willing to work with it before we work it out with the board.
Right. Again, I'm just saying whether there's a fence or not really is the village decision.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions, Sherry?
No, I'm done.
I've got one.
Okay, Jay?
I think this is for you, Bruce. Can you just explain to me the density requirements in the village? I know we've talked about it several times over many meetings, but I saw the number of 5.4 units per acre in the Lexington presentation. What is the
requirement in the 1R district is 7,000 feet per dwelling unit. And at 54 units, they meet that.
Is the density requirement different in every different zone? 1R versus R1 versus other? 1R
is unique in that it has multiple family as a special use and actually has this density standard. The other zoning districts don't allow multiple family. So we don't have that same standard because it doesn't exist in the other districts.
And again, just to be very specific, your ordinance says there should be 7,000 square feet per unit. So 43,560 square feet, 1 acre, divided by 7,000 per is 6.22 units per acre. So that's why when it shows 5.8 acres, it's 5.8 units per acre, it's below even what the ordinance contemplates as being permitted.
Yeah, I mean, I was asking just not specific development.
Did I answer your question then? I mean, okay. You have to push this thing right in the middle.
Oh, okay. I'm just wondering, we talked about it briefly, the impact of the construction on Deerfield Road. How's it going to affect the project? Because it's going to be overlapping.
Well, I can answer in part. In order to widen Deerfield Road, which I think right now is about 2.5 years off, the county has to provide comp storage. It provides comp storage for its own projects. If we weren't consolidating their storage with this project, then something like this, if it were developed on Federal Life, would have a project and would provide its comp storage. And 2 years later, when the county came in to widen the road, the county would come in and create additional storage on the Federal Life property, but not landscape, not done the same way. The village looked at this scenario and said, that's lousy. We don't want to have one construction project for a private development, a second construction project by the county 2 or 2.5 years later that undoes whatever we do. So part of the project and the proposal from Lexington, and basically what the village asked them very strongly to consider doing, is to include the county's work as part of this project. The county is basically okay with this concept. The details are to be worked out because the county was going to negotiate a payment to the owner of the property for the right to come on the property and create this comp storage that the county needs. Now, Lexington, if this is approved, is going to create the comp storage for the county. And there is a question about, okay, there is a restrictive easement to cover the area of the storage, but there's also the cost of creating it in the first place and creating it 2.5 years before the county actually has funding from the federal government, for example, to do this work. So we have some contract details to work out with the county, a sort of a 3-party agreement. But in terms of the comp storage itself, if this project goes forward, then there will be less disturbance in the area from the standpoint of comp storage as a result of the road than there would be if this project didn't go forward. In other words, we would do everything in one project here for comp storage that affects that area, Federal Life and so forth. The road widening itself is going to impact all the people along Deerfield Road. I mean, their entrance will be finished, their landscaping will be there, the monument sign will be there if they're approved, and then the county will come and bang everything up. And then just like any other landowner, they'll say, county, you banged everything up, come make it right. So that's my summary of what I expect to happen, both there, also on Colonial Court, also on the Brentwood side, on the Elevate Skilled Care Facility. Their parking is going to be affected. The right-of-way that the county needs is going to affect that, plus, areas going east on Deerfield towards Saunders. I think the county has something like at least 40-something easements that it's acquiring to widen Deerfield Road, up and down Deerfield Road. So it'll be noticeable. But I think their intent is to have the project mostly constructed if they're approved. And, the county comes in and they're just another landowner at that time. The association is another landowner being, banged up by the county while the work happens. And then hopefully the restoration will put it back. Is that a fair summary? Would you can amend it in any way?
No, I think it is a fair summary. Our intent is to do just that we, by doing it the way we're approaching it, is we can collectively control the design and build of the facility, irregardless in some sense of the county's timing, and then build it in such a way that it is, as Bruce said, an easement will be granted to the county for the stormwater facility, but the long-term maintenance of it, we will design, build it in such a way that we can then turn it over to our HOA to maintain it as an amenity for the community. I think what our hope is that if this goes forward and we build it, that the only piece that will be subject to the county coming in and completing after the fact would be the actual pavement, curb and gutter for Deerfield Road, and the path that's within their right of way. But basically build everything, curb, gutter, landscaping up to that right of way that should, when it's all done and said, be the only thing that's really disturbed after the fact by the county.
I get Sherry's point about the fence, but I agree that riverwoods and fences really aren't compatible, and I think fences are bad for wildlife. But as she observed, the woodland, the mulch path through the woodland kind of draws people toward the Meadow Lake properties. So I'd like to know, how do the Meadow Lake residents feel about that path?
Well, could you please talk in, Mary? Could you please use the microphone? Thank
And
you.
introduce yourself.
Yes, and say where you live.
Mary Oler, 14 Chicory Lane. I agree with Sherry that I think it's lovely for the residents of the proposed development, but it brings people right into the woodlands, and they're not going to know where the property ends. The woodlands are fairly thin, and there's shimmering water at the end. So what child, dog, and even adult isn't going to walk through the woodlands to that water? When I moved in, when I put a contract in my house in Meadow Lake, I put my young children into private swimming lessons the very same week. Their first lifeguard, their first babysitter was a certified lifeguard, and for the first 2 summers, they had life jackets on. It's not any retention pond, it's 7 feet deep, and a child could drown in it. My daughter's first birthday party at the house, one guest got so excited at the sight of the lake, she ran straight into it, fully clothed up to her neck, and I ran in straight after her, fully clothed. And it was not the last time I did it. I watched play dates like a hawk. It's not something to fool around with.
So I guess where I was going with this was, how about the same woodlands, everything the same, just no mulch path?
Well, we want to get through all the plan commission comments first, so you can open up the comment. Anyone else? Carrie, do you have any? Okay, or you want to open up to public comment?
I have some comments, please. Do you want to make some comments in general, Carrie?
It was just a comment on one of the slides. I wanted to know about when you pull into the complex, the roads, how big they are. I know we might have mentioned that, but I was just curious, like when the cars go, how is it? I wanted to look at that one slide again and ask a question. That was all. But we could do it later. It's not a big deal.
Let's do it. Let's get your question answered.
Okay. All right. Maybe they could show that slide again.
Which slide is it?
It was the one where they were showing the road on there inside the complex. I think it's one there. Let's just see it. No, not that. No, it was one more like I could actually see what it looked like. No, keep,
No.
keep going, keep going.
Right there.
No, keep going.
No.
No, it was like you could actually see like it was a nice view of it.
Backwards. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. That one.
Was it that one? Okay. What I wanted to know is when you pull in, how long is this? It's not really that one. It was a slide that actually was a full view. It looked like really nice. It was showing like a beautiful view of it.
Way at the end. The artist kind of 3D.
Yeah, it's a 3D version. That's right. That's what I was asking.
So,
Wait. Yeah, there was one more that was even more close up. Keep going. Oh, wait. Yep. That one. Yes.
all right.
So my question is, now I'm looking at this and I'm just trying to understand how large this is, how many cars. Is this one way? Like, are there two?
So when you first come in, it's two-way traffic,
Okay, that was my, okay. So how,
25 feet back to back.
okay, that was,
And then the quasi cul-de-sac, the one-way circulation
mhm.
is 20 feet because that's the minimum for fire trucks.
Okay,
And on that, there is parking on one side and there's loading areas.
There is,
And we've
okay.
shown the parking, the fire truck movements through that area.
I guess it looks real small from this view, but maybe I just don't understand it, but it looks like it not very wide. That's the only thing.
We worked with the village staff to come up with roadways that were meeting the needs of the development, that were not deemed excessive, but also provide life safety.
Okay, all right. That was my question. I just wanted to know more. But, okay.
Are there any
Thank
other questions by other commissioners before I have a few questions that I want to throw out there? I want to discuss affordable housing. Okay, well, I have 2 points about affordable housing, and I'd like to open that up to discussion by commissioners when I get done with my 2 comments. First comment is the village affordable housing policy goal is 15% of the residences in new developments. So Lexington should be proposing 8 on-site affordable units for sale. They've proposed 3 on-site with payments in lieu for the remaining 5. This is the first time the village will have exercised its affordable housing policy, and I don't think we should shy away from the goal that we've set. If we must entertain a lower number of on-site affordable units, I think we should be closer to 6 units with 2 payment in lieu units. This is if the board and the plan commission decide to accept the concept of payments in lieu, which we don't have to accept either. So this is something that we should discuss, which leads me to my second comment, which is Lexington proposes a payment in lieu of $125,000 per unit. A payment in lieu is intended to assist construction of future affordable units elsewhere in the village. So if the board and the plan commission accept the payment in lieu concept, I feel $125,000 per unit is not sufficient to build affordable housing elsewhere in our village. As a frame of reference, the median value of a house in Riverwoods in 2020 was $706,000. Highland Park uses the number $175,000 per unit for its payments in lieu. Choosing a payment in lieu is a difficult calculation. It's based on a variety of things, and it differs by municipality. So I suggest that we recommend, if we go with this concept of payment in lieu, that we recommend that the village retain an expert who can do these calculations for our village and not accept the proposal until it has that number. So I'd like your thoughts on these comments.
Yeah, I think when we first started talking about the affordable housing that was being provided, some very wise person in the audience did the math and said basically if we only have 3 affordable units in and at that point it was, I believe, a 69 proposed, but now it's a 54 proposed. If we only have 3 affordable units and we add those residences to the number of residents in the village, we are decreasing the number of affordable units that we have in the village rather than increasing it. And I find that very concerning.
Any other thoughts? We can come back to it later when we get ready to make recommendations. Okay, anything else from plan commissioners? All right, if not, then we would like to hear from anybody who would like to comment. Please come up and take the microphone and identify yourself. Right, state your name and your address. Thank you.
Address is actually not necessary.
You don't need the, okay,
Hi,
just your name. just-
Paul Odell, 2 Bainbury Lane in Meadow Lake. My house has a top of foundation, which is the lowest in Meadow Lake. And when the Des Plaines River floods, we typically have to wait some number of days or maybe more than a week for the flow to go back into the river. So I have a question about lot 15, which is that the closest to Deerfield Road? And then lot 16, the water retention ponds. They're going to silt up after a period of time. And if you get 6 or 12 inches of silt in there, I think you're going to decrease the capacity for water retention by some significant percentage. And what you need to do is dredge that every once in a while to keep the same design basis water retention capacity. And I don't know how that's going to be enforced. Who's going to check it every few years? Who pays to do it? And who checks to make sure it was done properly? Because if the water retention capacity is reduced and you have a high elevation at flood level in the Des Plaines River, it's got to go somewhere. And without that design basis capacity, we're going to have more flooding, and some of it may go into the Meadow Lake property. So it's just a question that I asked maybe the staff of Riverwoods to take a look at. Second question is, well, not a question, a comment. If a fence is put in, excuse me, along the back at the north side of the property, we already have fences along the east side of Chicory. If you drive in on Chicory from Deerfield Road, there's 120 feet of fencing all the way up to number 1 Chicory driveway. And if you look right at the corner of Deerfield and Chicory, the fence goes down Deerfield, and it even has 3 rows of barbed wire at the top of that fence. And all along Deerfield Road, there's a lot of wooden fence. If a fence is put in, I think somebody should have control over maintaining it, because a windstorm can bring down a limb, and that can knock out some portion of a fence. And I don't trust people who put up a fence who aren't controlled by Meadow Lake to maintain it. You can drive around Lake County and see a lot of wood fences around a lot of areas, including right on Deerfield Road, where parts of them have toppled over, boards are missing. So if there is a fence put up along that north property line, maybe we should have some kind of Meadow Lake right in perpetuity granted for Meadow Lake, either the West Lake Committee or maybe Meadow Lake Homeowners Association, to have the right, the sole right to repair that according to whatever design we want to do. And maybe there should be a fund provided by Lexington at the beginning that will be owned, the fund would be owned by Meadow Lake or the West Lake Committee, and they could use the interest from that to repair the boards from time to time, including, right after it's built. There may be a windstorm that knocks out part of the section of that fence. And if we don't control that, if Meadow Lake doesn't control that, it can stay down for years. I think we've had problems with the shops of Riverwoods, where if boards are missing, it takes a long time to get them repaired. I don't care whether we have a fence or not, but if we do, I think you got to look at maintaining it, and don't
assume that it's going to be maintained by the owners of those new townhouses. Thanks.
Thank you. Other visitors wishing to address?
You know, when we talk about the fences, I mean, let's use a little imagination. It doesn't have to be a 12-foot solid wood fence. It could be a black chain fence that would mend into the foliage, you know, when things start turning green like they are now, and you probably wouldn't even notice it. I'm president of the HOA at Meadow Lake, and I just renewed our insurance, and one of the questions was about the ponds and saying, can anybody just go into the pond? And I said, there's no common area around our ponds. Every lot is contiguous, and if you're going to go into the pond, you're crossing somebody's property. So now we get into a sort of something a little bit different where Lexington is, because there's a couple of slivers of people's land that they're really not using, but just has trees on it. That's their property technically, and really you can't police it. It's impossible. You know, so I'm thinking maybe just to identify myself as an HOA, if we can have some kind of fence that would mend into the foliage, something that's maybe smart looking, you know, and then we could put a couple signs and say no trespassing. At least it might, I don't know, from a litigious standpoint, maybe I'd safeguard myself. Maybe I'm not a lawyer, you know, maybe Bruce, you would know. In terms of what you were talking about, and I understand you got to play both sides of this, Bruce, I get it, you know, and I'm not calling you out, but you know, to think that anybody is going to, who live in our development, that's going to go and on these paths and use that to go in the shops is just so ridiculous. It's not even, there's not even a way to get there. You'd have to walk around these ponds through everybody's backyard to actually try to get onto this path. Not even closely realistic. So I understand, but it's just a point that you guys should know. You know, I'm really not against this. I'm really not. And I've said it a number of times that I've spoke here, and there's been some consideration in terms of what the homeowners were thinking and saying, coming from 69, going down to 54 units. You know, we've gotten somewhere. It's good. You know, what goes on off of Deerfield Road and the amount of money you're going to spend in berming that thing and putting all this beautiful foliage in there, that's wonderful for the cars that are going to be driving down Deerfield Road, and it's good for the village of Riverwoods because they're concerned about that. But our development that's going to be mostly affected by this, they're doing nothing in the back. You're not increasing the barrier. You're not, I haven't heard one thing you're saying that the white pines are something that's native to Riverwoods. Well, then put some white pines back there. Try to put some more foliage up there. You know, this path that we're putting in, I agree, it's nice. It's, you know, in theory, you know, but in fact, it is bringing people closer to our development. And we're not saying we don't like people. We don't want to be there, but it's a lovely area, and it's pretty, you know, insulated, you know, to where we are. And by putting this, I don't want to say massive development, but it's a fairly dense development here. You know, I just think, you know, if you would say, hey, okay, we'll answer your concerns, we'll put a fence back there for you, and we're going to add a lot of landscaping back there just to maybe add to the barrier that between the two, not to necessarily just totally, you know, so you're not going to see it. You're going to see it. You're going to see these buildings. You know, they're not going to be 20 feet tall, but just enough where people just can't easily walk back and forth, and there's some kind of barrier. So thank you for your time.
Can you give us your name? You didn't get our name.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
Yeah, Randy. Yeah.
Christy?
On here? Yeah. Yes.
Click there's a switch, there's a lever on it, on the top. Unless it's.
Hi, Christy Sherman. I'm kind of with Randy in that there's a part of me that really wants this to work out. I really would like to see it work out. But I've done so much research recently on attractive nuisance. I've done a lot of research on drowning, and drowning is in a pond is the fourth highest, most common drowning is in a pond or lake. And I see with this development, a couple things I just want to say, whether it makes a difference or not. The TESCA, who wrote a memo and had lots of really great suggestions, I found it really interesting that a lot of the things that Lexington said that they weren't going to do, and a lot of the things I've heard in the conversations tonight, is that you're building it knowing that you've got all these restrictions. I would have thought of even living here. So I'm wondering, do you do a traffic study around the circle? Because think about people coming in and out. Think about trucks, FedEx, Amazon, UPS. I mean, I wonder what kind of traffic's going to go through there. And if my mom happened to live there, and she had my sisters over, and there are other people, I might not even be able to get out of my car and visit her because there's no parking. I don't personally really care, but to me, this is showing that we're giving up a lot of our Riverwoods principles, to build something like this. And we've referred to our plan, and the comprehensive plan, the first two paragraphs, it talks about Riverwoods has a rich history of community planning. This 2019 revision built on efforts of our predecessors to respect and preserve the distinctive woodland, ravine environment and low density character of our community. This in exchange for access roads. So in my mind, I'm thinking half of that access road the village wants, right? So you want an access road and you want to have affordable housing. And I feel like it's at the expense of Meadow Lake. If you're going to do this, and by the way, I don't think a fence is going to work, because what is the fence going to be attached to on each side? They're just going to walk around the fence. I don't know what the solution is, but I think this is really scary. And if there's anything you're going to do, like Randy said, I'm actually disappointed that you didn't come back and really understand this issue and come back already saying, we're going to, if you're interested, we're going to put, we'll put these trees, we'll do whatever we can to help shield you, because you've now changed the whole complexion of our part of our neighborhood, the privacy that we had. And I'm not going to go and read this, but the next paragraph talked about the large lots and privacy. So I just think we're getting away from our core values, and we're trying to, shove a circle in a square. I mean, this is, I would be embarrassed to live here. And I think people that live here are going to find, they wouldn't even put a path in, a walking path to go around when you park in the garage for someone, if they parked in the back, they'd have to walk 360 feet around the front. And TESCA said, I think you should put sidewalk or something there. And because if you don't do it when you build new, somebody's going to have they're just going to have a natural walking path. And so there's all these no. And it's all because it's going to take away from the space. Well, obviously there's not enough space. This is not a great development. And I do have a question. The balconies, it says that the balconies are big balconies, that they go from one side to the other. And there's not one drawing that I've seen that. Is that true, that the balconies over like a big balcony overlooking my driveway with other cars? How big are the balconies? How wide are they? Yes.
They stretch across, I think they're 17 wide by 4.5 feet deep.
All right, so The pictures didn't depict that. It actually showed some of them that were smaller, and it didn't look like that. I just find it insulting with words talking about, you know, like you even say that the size of the units are big, and they're 1,600 feet to 2,200 feet. I mean, the average house, our houses, like was said before, 700,000 to I think it's 1.2 million is an average. This just doesn't. It's not the right thing to do with the property, and I'd rather get the committee together and try and figure out the right thing to do with it and get community behind it. But this just doesn't feel like it.
Next person, please.
Matthew Eisenstein, EIS. I'll go on record saying I'm against this project, but I'm assuming that some form of it's going forward. I saw the landscape renderings, and they looked, the foliage and all the things in there look pretty nice. I'm assuming they're not going in looking like that. And I may not live long enough to actually see the neighborhood with that kind of landscaping features, with the trees that mature and the undergrowth that mature. But I noticed they no longer are putting any significant landscaping between Meadow Lake and the buildings. I think one of the earlier renderings had multiple pines or some sort of evergreen all along that back wall to help shield the view. And I'm wondering what happened to all that. They certainly put a lot along Deerfield Road, and I'd like to see something more in that density between Meadow Lake and this project. Other thing I'm concerned about is maintenance. It was kind of brought up before with fencing, but I think it's the same with landscaping. We've seen this rodeo before. The shots of Riverwoods had beautiful renderings of what it would look like with the lake there. It looks atrocious, and as things died, no one's replaced them. The prison-looking storage building has very little landscaping and a huge light on top of it that you can see, even with foliage on the trees. I think landscaping is going to be really important, and I think there should be some sort of fund that would, that community would have to put into to guarantee the maintenance and replacement of things that would die. So, thank you.
Marvin Himmelstein, 25 Chicory Lane. Himmelstein, Himmelstein. Marvin. Sometime earlier, I asked about the tax revenue that was going to be generated from these buildings, and I never got an answer. I'm assuming it's going to be considerably less than what's generated out of the Meadow Lake homes.
Would you like me to try to hazard an answer? So,
sure.
Let's say that the units go for a price of 500,000, and there's 50 units sold at that price. Someone do that math for me, 25 million. So I would expect the assessor to assess the properties the way they assess properties. And in Lake County, is that 33%? Okay. The current assessed value of Federal Life we can look up, but I think it's less than what this new development would be.
I understand.
So just from the standpoint of property taxes, I would expect property taxes to go up, to be, the property would pay more property taxes than Federal Life is paying today. And then, there's other per capita amounts that the village gets. The village has hired a consultant who is going to be doing some fiscal analysis. If the project is approved, from a zoning standpoint, then the developer and the village have a lot of financial things to talk about. And part of our way of viewing the benefit of that is to understand what the economics are. We haven't run all those numbers yet, but just from the sheer standpoint of the value of the construction versus what the current property is paying, I would expect the tax bill to go up.
Agreed. However, Federal Life doesn't take any services. Basically, they don't have students in schools. And I think you said that they projected 3 students would come out of there. Is that what five elementary?
So the property, so I can reassure you about that, the property is in a TIF district. So under the state law, when the real estate tax increment from the property is collected, part of it has to go to the schools, and it's based on the number of students in the development. So while the village is able to recoup some of the tax increment to help with some of the costs, the infrastructure costs, like the access road, the part that benefits beyond the project's boundaries, other aspects of that increment go back to other taxing bodies. So there's some thought to that.
Yeah. Well, I know that the Thorngate had the same problem. They marketed that as a empty nester, and that's not what it turned out to be. And there were so many students that came into the Deerfield School District that folks who had the homes that justified that were paying for those people. But
anyway, at least from the standpoint of economics, that's what I know so far.
I understand the economics, but just this is marketed for 5 students. People want to get into the Deerfield School District. That's no doubt about it. At any cost, nearly any cost.
I think that the amount that goes to the school district from the increment is determined by the school district's own calculations, won't be the developer's calculations.
I understand. It's not, but I'm just pointing that out. Big question is, what is the value of this development to the village? What does the village get out of this? If you don't have an answer, it's okay.
Well, no. So the answers are on several levels. The developer has submitted a list of what it thinks are benefits. When you know that a property owner says it can't make a good use of its property, I have heard from brokers over the years that the office building on the Federal Life's property is obsolete. It's hard to adapt. The question is, what is the use that will go on the site? Now, in the past, we've had inquiries from people who wanted to put congregate care facilities, assisted living buildings. We had someone come in with a 6-story building. So you can always ask yourself, what is the alternative?
Agreed.
And one of the things that, and I'm not trying to make the developer's case, but from the village's standpoint, there are costs in this site because of the comp storage, because of the access road, that we feel like we can get participation from a developer, then the village is better off. That's not to say that we're going to come out whole. The village is going to have to cover some of this cost as well. But if this was, just to take an example, as some of the residents have suggested, if this was just 4 or 5 single-family homes, those homes couldn't really afford any of the infrastructure that's going on this site. So you could look at this as, yes, you're getting more density. Yes, it's this type of housing we don't have that much in the village. Some people think that is actually a beneficial thing, but you're getting an improvement to the land. I don't know what the overall, Nate, I don't know, what do you project as your overall pro forma cost for this project, if you were to say what the cost of this project is?
Well, let me think for a second.
No one's going to hold you to it because we're not going to accept your numbers until we vet them. But my point is that, as a village, when you see the opportunity to have new development and to take care of some other problems, those are potential benefits that you weigh against the things that you're pointing out, which are some of the downsides. Then nothing comes with just one or the other.
Absolutely. Next question is, as Matt just said, maintaining the property has been a problem, not with Federal Life, but with the property that the village put on the corner. And we have done nothing but fight with them over money for years. How are we going to, the homeowners there may or may not want to maintain it. How do you solve that problem?
So we've learned some things. When the detention basin was designed for shops, it was done by engineers. No offense to you, Todd, it was done by engineers. Since that time, the village has engaged with the village ecologist. Our entire process in the village is different. We have cost sharing programs, we have native planning, we have an understanding of things. And one of the things that Steve Zimmerman has hammered into us is that if you want a detention basin to look nice, it has to be designed by an ecologist from the start. Like, you can't have an engineer just cut a hole in the ground and then put stuff in and hope it goes. So there are two things that the village has done to try and improve on its record. And I know people have been disappointed by shops. It's a constant sore point. One is that we told the developer here to use a 4-to-1 slope because that's what Steve Zimmerman recommended, our village ecologist. The design of these detention basins was largely influenced, I think Sharon would say this was largely taken from what Steve Zimmerman specified in order for them to succeed as a naturalized basin. The other thing that we started doing, and it's one of the suggested conditions here in a memo to the Plan Commission, it's something that we have done with Thornton's, it's something we did with CubeSmart, is that where there is a naturalized area, we now require, and we definitely have told them we're going to write this into the restrictions on the property, that they have to have a qualified ecological contractor on an annual contract to maintain. We have that in, we're going to have that in place with Thornton's for their native areas. So the only, because we know that if you get a mow and go guy to come in and do it, they will destroy it. We know that. We know that. So so those are our two efforts at solving this problem: are better design and a better understanding of long-term maintenance.
Well, if I don't know who you're going to go into a contract to maintain it, but Lexington's going to walk away when they're done. So it's up to the homeowners association. How are you going to force them into paying for that?
So in the homeowner covenants, we normally have some restrictions that they have to follow that the village has the right to enforce. If you look at the Thorngate Declaration, it says, here's a bunch of landscaping, here's the things that have to be done. And if you don't do it, the village can come in and enforce this. I'm very sure of that because I wrote that provision. And the, we have, even if you look at the, I can't speak from memory of the most recent version of the Meadow Lake covenants, but because I know Brian Meltzer drafted them, but or participated in them, but I think there is a provision for some village approval even in those. And when we have a special use and when we grant approval for any kind of PUD or development like this, the village has a say-so in the restrictive covenants that go with the property. So that's how we would do it. We would reserve the right to come in and enforce those. We have the right, with shops, but
we don't enforce them.
Well, we're hoping to get better. I know.
Hope is wonderful.
But our problem has been that we couldn't make them recreate what wasn't designed the way it should have been designed. That's been our problem.
Right.
The way it should have been
However,
designed.
hindsight's always much better than foresight, and we can have the same problem here. One of the things that went and I didn't quite understand was about how the water wouldn't flow back into Meadow Lake if there was those river. How do you guarantee that?
I think I should let the engineer answer this question. Not me.
So we have to design to the village and Lake County standards. And these plans are reviewed by your village engineer. Then we have to produce as-builts. If it's not built how it was designed, it gets corrected. From the standpoint of stuff happening downstream, stormwater management is an everyday living thing, and it must be maintained upstream and downstream. A gentleman mentioned sedimentation. When the Deerfield Road project gets built, they have to control their sediment before it goes into our basin. If Colonial Shopping Center gets redeveloped at some time, or portions of it, they're going to create sediment. They have to stop that sediment before it gets to our ponds. So from the standpoint of guaranteeing it's needs to be built correctly,
Who oversees the fact that they did it wrong? How do we know that
it's a combination of Lexington, the contractor,
after a few years?
then it's a standpoint of maintaining development in accordance with the declarations and restrictive covenants.
Same problem. Okay, thank you.
Mary Oler. I had a question for the landscaper. When you did the images showing what the buildings would look like from Meadow Lake, did you raise the grade of the, as it will be raised to build the buildings? You did, okay. Because with all due respect, I find it hard to believe that buildings of the same height built on a raised grade, well, much closer to Meadow Lake, significantly closer to Meadow Lake, are not going to show over the trees anymore. I don't understand how that could possibly be the case. I have one question for Bruce, if I may, first name. If a child trespasses through our property and is injured in the lake or drowns, am I liable?
I don't really know the answer to that,
Okay, I think we should know the answer to that
but
before we go forward.
I think that I would say this. These are risk management issues that we have all around the village. We have detention in Thorngate, right? We did not build Thorngate because it had detention. So the detention areas here, are they required to have safety ledges, Todd, in this area?
Yes, they're shallow.
So I don't know how, the epoch in which the lakes in Meadow Lake were constructed was a different era. I don't know if you have safety ledges of the same nature that are designed today.
I don't think so.
So, every area has its unique challenges. I would say that the way to address the risk is not to say no development can occur on a parcel. Some development's going to occur. And, the risk management actions that you need to take, I would say, is to consult with your insurance and other specialists. Posting is one thing. I mean, I think the point that was made about, where do you put a fence do you run it to the edges and then how do you know that the fence actually is accomplishing its aim?
You never know completely that a fence is accomplishing its aim, but when it could be a matter of a child's life or death, then we want to do the best we can. And I think before the Plan Commission passes on this, it's a fair question. What liability would Meadow Lake homeowners individually or collectively have? If you're going to have a little walking path and the water is right there.
Well, so if you don't have the walking path, people can still walk in there.
People can still walk there, and I think they will, but I think you're potentially burdening Meadow Lake homeowners with a great risk. And I think that's something that we should all know before we pass on this. What potential expenses for our would, and most of all, what risks. Having spent many years keeping children safe in Meadow Lake, and although there are ponds, retention ponds in other parts of the village, I don't think you can get in up to your neck as quickly, or that they are all so deep, and there are not beaches and boats and all those things and inflatables that draw a child toward those beaches. So I think it's different. I respectfully disagree with our homeowner association press, if that's all right. I am opposed to this as it currently exists. I think it doesn't work. It was frustrating to be here for months as Lexington was arguing for a lot of zoning changes and amendments to be declared an RPUD, which was really trying to take regulations designed for 128 acres and make them fit for 8. And I think as the project evolved, as you said, one of the things that became clear is that they could not possibly fulfill those regulations in this site and have it work. And yet, those aren't just regulations to be discarded because they were critical to maintaining the atmosphere of Riverwoods. They talked about varied and nuanced housing forms and winding roads and having the buildings sit in kind of a natural way on the site. One thing we have asked from the very first plan was that it not look like barracks. If you can imagine being across the lake from that and this row of buildings with 17-foot balconies, 3 stories up, half of the year at least without that foliage. It is a huge invasion of privacy, and it completely changes the natural aspect of our landscape, which is why most of us moved to Riverwoods and Meadow Lake. So I think the neighbor who has sold a home closest to this development took a loss of almost $100,000 off the recently estimated value of that home because anticipating this coming in. So, and some of us have driven to Lexington complexes to have a look around. It's very tight building. They wouldn't, as Christy said, they wouldn't even put a little pathway through so people didn't have to walk all the way around the building to get to the garage, and a number of things that the consultant said would make it more gracious and livable. There isn't enough parking without imposing. I'm sure that when there are holidays, people will park at the nursing home and other places. And there is not a lot of green space. People are going to probably come into Meadow Lake with their children and their dogs. So I think it's still not befitting Riverwoods. I am for doing some development that makes more efficient use of land to make it more affordable. I am pro affordable housing, and I'm happy to have it in my backyard. But I think there are examples that fit, and you don't have to go further than Lincolnshire to see some very nice ones, not barracks like this. This doesn't look like Riverwoods. So those are my concerns. Thank you very much.
Jason Goodman. A few things. It sounds like the drive going into the shopping center was Riverwood's request. I'm going to be able to cut through there, right, to avoid the stoplight at Milwaukee?
No,
No. Why not?
because our police will ticket you.
Okay. Same thing going back the other way.
You know, you're gonna be on a road, which will be a village road. You're gonna hit Colonial Court, and you're gonna be in a narrow drive aisle of a parking lot with people backing out and stuff like that. So to go into that parking lot with the idea that you're saving time, you're gonna be maneuvering around, traffic, parking. There's a parking issue in Colonial Court, with the times with the restaurant and stuff. So I mean, People could potentially cut through around Thornton's. There's the issue of cut through traffic is a perennial issue in traffic management. And I don't think that we would want to see people, racing through and trying to cut through Colonial Court. I don't think that would be looked on very well.
Chief's not here, right? I've cut through that shopping center more than once.
Yeah.
Both ways.
What happens here stays here, so you're fine.
So that's one concern. If you intentionally want the residents to be able to go there, it doesn't sound like they had a choice. That was them accommodating the village. I'll let you guys decide.
Well, it was two things. It was would the shopping centers completely fall apart without anything, and then what would we do? Because then we would never, let's say the shopping centers revived, then we have better successful shopping centers. People have complained a long time about the quality of the shopping center, so at least maybe we get, but what if they fail? If they fail and they don't have any usable access, what could we get there? So, one possibility is that retail doesn't succeed there long-term because of whatever, and then maybe that becomes more housing.
I hope so.
So
in which case you'll be very happy you have that road there. I would just recommend that you have a sign there telling me that I can't cut through there.
Would you pay attention?
There's no sign at Colonial Court.
Don't answer the question. Don't answer the question.
Okay, so just a few other comments. Yes, it does look like Army barracks. It looks like public housing the way it's set up right now. Maybe this is you trying to maximize the amount of building without disrupting the greenery. It would be nicer if there was a little bit more randomness maybe in its placement. That's my second point. I wish it was more attractive looking in that regard. Number three, I do think the walking path will bring more pedestrian activity towards the adjacent neighborhood. I would imagine that having as deep foliage as you could there would prevent people from possibly trying to get into Meadow Lake. I live in Thorngate, so I'm a more neutral advisor here, but I think the current Federal Life building is such an eyesore. This would be far prettier than looking at that building. So at some point, you got to get rid of that building. You got to find some sort of new tenant. And if you keep passing up every opportunity you get, it sounds like you've already passed up several. And if you pass up this one, you're going to end up with an 800,000 square foot warehouse in that place. So be careful what you wish for. In the future, and you're seeing this, there's just a lot more warehousing space. You're going to get to a point where that's the only option left is someone building a massive warehouse, and you're going to be lucky that you can get them instead of Buffalo Grove or one of the other competing neighborhoods there. So this is far better than Federal Life. Could the design be better? I don't know. If you want more randomness, you're going to probably creep closer and closer to Meadow Lake, so you pick your battle there. Living in Thorngate, we have a lot of bodies of water. We have homes really close to that water. No one has gotten hurt. There are tons of kids around. I think your worry about drowning I think you're reaching. You're talking about people that aren't even in your neighborhood. Really worry about the kids that come to visit. Yes. Worry about the kids that are actually in Meadow Lake. You're worrying about people that aren't even, what are they going to go through the woods to try and get to you? Like they're that desperate to get to your lakes. If they want to go jump in a lake, there's a lake right there. If they want to go canoeing, they can go canoeing on Des Plaines River. No one of our kids, and there are a lot of kids, the kids do not go near the water, and their kids looking at their kids. They're not jumping in your lake. If you do build a fence, which I don't think I am against fences. I live in Thorngate. There are times of the year where I wish I had a fence. I live right next to Deerfield Road. I have no fence, and it's Deerfield Road. My kid could go from my backyard onto Deerfield Road in about 8 seconds. But because I don't have a fence, when you do drive down Deerfield Road, it is beautiful that you have a canopy of trees and you just have trees on left and right instead of a huge fence along Thorngate. Someday there will be a fence along Thorngate. It's going to be 15 feet high. And well, I'm digressing. I think that when we were meeting months ago, it was all about nature and the beautiful animals and the trees. And putting up a fence here, the deer aren't going to be very happy with the fence you put up. So let's be consistent too. Either we're going to be pro nature and let not have a fence. The reason for your fence is the ponds. No. If the reason for your fence is you don't like the people that are going to be living there and you don't want them coming into your neighborhood, then say that. Don't say like, oh, it's the kids and they're going to drown. So that's all. Thanks.
Push up the lever on the top.
Hi, Christy Sherman again. Okay, two things. I don't want people trespassing. There is a risk. I don't care what anybody says, and I don't know what you were doing when you were a kid, but I was at 2 and 3 in the morning. We're going in people's pools. We're going yard hopping. So I don't really know what you're talking about, and I'm glad your kids are so well behaved. But besides the concern with somebody getting injured or death, I don't want people trespassing. We didn't buy this home on this beautiful lake to be worried about people trespassing and possibly getting injured. So the second thing I wanted to say is that in the document that I think Lori, you wrote this, it was the memo. And in a section of the memo, and I feel like I'm always I read everything that's out there, and I'm trying to use our own provisions and rules to be able to say we're not living into them. But there's a thing on page 4 that says standards for plan commission consideration. And it talks about no special use shall be granted by the village board unless the special use, and there's 3 items. It says is deemed beneficial for the public convenience at that location, is so designed, located, and proposed to be operated that the public health, safety, and morals and welfare and interest will be protected. So that's one that I'm leaning on, because I don't think Meadow Lake, that this is a good thing for Meadow Lake in any way, and then will not cause substantial injury to the value of other property in the neighborhood in which it is located. I will tell you that our property values will drop. They already have. So anyway, so I just wanted to say those 2 more comments.
That's not correct. Hi, I'm Dave Matson. I live in Meadow Lake. Let's talk about what Lexington has done right tonight. I mean, come on. On their website, they do talk about their unique ability to find gems and build in areas that, again, they use the word gem. Totally right about that. Riverwoods is a gem. That's why I'm here. That's why the rest of these fine folks are here. Another thing Lexington has done right is rezoning to 1R residential. I think it's a prime opportunity for residential housing. Although, again, referencing Lexington's website, I really, truly am still charmed by your park side of Glenview. I really am. And for those of you who are not familiar with it, parks out of Glenview, they range from 2,600 square feet to 3,500 square feet. Those are 29 single-family homes. Those start at around $1.2 million. And the description, and forgive me if I'm repeating myself, but they are nestled into a lovely garden-like setting within a well-established neighborhood. Ideally, that's what I was hoping to see with a revamp of your proposal. But basically what we're talking about here is precedent setting. And thank you, commissioners, for talking about affordable housing. It was me who did the math. And I think I've forgotten how I did it, but it's in my computer somewhere if you and I want to talk about it. Thank you, Bruce, for bringing up police. No one's talked about police or fire. We're talking about 59 units. Let's say there's 4 people per unit. That's another 236 people in Riverwoods. And if we're talking about cars, if you can fit 2 in the driveway, 2 in the garage, it's 236 more cars. I think if you talk to our police or fire, they would say, yeah, we probably need some more resources to handle this. So consider that. And finally, looking at the project benefits from the March 16th Lexington memo, talking about all the benefits. If I wrote those, I would actually talk about Riverwoods. Thank you.
Are there any other?
Get it on. Christina Overbuch from 7 Chicory Lane. Averbruch. Thank you. So I have been having several concerns as far as this development goes. We were present on most of the meetings. We missed a few, unfortunately, due to us having kids and not always be available at nighttime. But the concerns are actually have not changed since the beginning of this development and all the presentations that have been done. I have not seen the actual answers to all the questions that we are continuously asking as residents of Meadow Lake. Lakes are not the same as in other developments. There aren't that many lakes in which you can actually swim in and have the beach to them. So you can't really compare the retention ponds to the lake. So I can't really find the kid who will be like, hey, let me swim in the dirty water because it's fun. But what about, hey, there is a beach, so people actually do go inside of those lakes, they do spend their time swimming, and they do have, all of us who have the beach, we have all the supplies for actually swimming in it. So we have pedal boats, we have kayaks, we have a bunch of different things that we are using, and they are always laying at our beach. We are not hiding anything because thankfully we don't have much robbers going around our neighborhood. Thank you to the police and to the actual village for taking care of our protection. So I don't see kids from here not having that thought of running over there. Again, coming from a perspective of being a child myself. I did not have a chance to go run to the lakes, but I have gone, in my town, we just didn't have the lakes. But we had the river, and guess what? We were always being told not to go there, we're not allowed. What did we do in the summer days? We went to the beach. And our parents had no idea we were doing it, and nobody is protecting it. Here, the kids, from the time they can ride the bicycles, they can do the same thing. So where is the guarantee this will not happen? Where is the guarantee from the developers who's going to build this, sell it, and be done with it? They're not going to be managing this thing. They're going to be out. As soon as they sell the last unit, they're going to shake the hands and be like, thank you, the village, for giving us an opportunity to make millions of dollars. You're out of here. Let's find another site where we can build same barracks. So to the barracks, have they changed the appearance? So you come into the village, that is filled with all the houses that are unique. If you commissioners live in our village, none of you have the same house. None of us have similar house. Not a single one of our residents in this village has the identical house to another. We're all unique. Here you're building pure barracks. The landscape, where is this landscape? Surrounding the pods? That's the only landscape you're seeing. So you build the trail for walking, which is good, thank you. You addressed one issue where people can actually take their dogs and kids out. I don't see the guest parkings, because again, back to the Thanksgiving, are you only gonna invite 2 guests? And you're gonna say to the rest of your family members, I'm not even talking friends, to be like, hey, don't show up into my house because you have no parking? Or you're gonna be parking at those shops that are not allowed to be parking the cars overnight or past a particular time frame. So this has not been addressed. The image has not been addressed. So there's still barracks, there's still no backyard. So where is the backyard for each resident who lives there? So they're still staring at somebody else's garage, and you're gonna say that people will actually want to live there for long? What is the probability for those residents to actually want to keep those units and continue staring at somebody else's garage? Or they're gonna get sick and tired and start moving, and there's gonna be just always, all the time, new people moving in and moving out, moving in and moving out. Because eventually, I mean, how many years can you handle looking at the garage? You just want the space. You move to Riverwoods for schools, but at the same time, to have the nature. There is not a single thing that's been implied for those residents to have the nature. There's no playgrounds that are built there. Where are the kids going to be entertaining themselves? Is there a single playground built? I don't see it. Did I miss it? I mean, I was not here in the beginning of the presentation. Have it changed and there is a playground and I'm not just seeing it? Again, I was not here in the beginning of the presentation. But have we seen the 3D images that you can do using the programs that I'm sure you have architects that are working for you? Have we seen how this development is actually in real life is going to look? Not in those images that any child can do, but the actual footage of how it looks as me, regular humans, standing over there and looking at it. As the village perspective, do you see this as the image of our village? Because this is the first thing anybody driving into the village from Milwaukee and Deerfield is going to see. Next to our sign, they're going to see barracks. Not a single place within our village has it. Why does Lincolnshire protect themselves and actually continue the image? Why are we as a village decided that just because this particular builder comes in to build their cookie cutters, because for you as a builder, I'm pretty sure it's much cheaper to just use the same drawings you've been using over and over and over again, instead of coming up with something new, something you have not done to accommodate the village you're coming into. We are not opposed townhouses. We're not opposed people developing over here and making money. Of course, we're all living to make money, same as you. But you can actually do something that will create the image of Riverwoods. You can create same money, maybe even more, because people will want to move over here to have the nature, to have the great schooling, to have the space to go out, and to be welcoming and invite actually people over to your house, instead just to look at the barracks. The schools are going to be, our schools is not going to get bigger. So you've mentioned that part of the fund for the property taxes, just like everywhere else, because this is how the property taxes work, is going to go towards the school. But will that make the school facility bigger? So what exactly is school going to do to accommodate all those kids that are going to hit our schools? Our schools are filled with kids right now, filled. There is no empty spaces there. So how is that going to be done? Are those funds going to be used to build new facility, new school, to add another elementary school to our developers? How many more doors are we going to open to the developers, just like Lexington, to just build barracks all over our village? Why can they accommodate to come into our village with unique architecture and to actually build something that sustains our image, has same appearance as everywhere else you're gonna drive down our streets. But the beginning, right as you enter the village, is this. I did not move into this village, into the barracks. If I wanted the barracks, I would have moved somewhere else. Not somewhere where nature and uniqueness is preserved. The flooding issue has not been fully addressed either, because nobody so far wanted to take a responsibility and to say, hey, you're gonna build this and maybe in 10 years, you guys are gonna be flooding and we're gonna take care of you. So you as a village will be collecting money every year for all those units and from all of us. Will you be setting a fund aside that will protect us as the residents of the village, the ones who already live here, not the potential ones, not the builder who comes and goes, because to them, they don't care. They can care less about our feelings. They're here to make money. In the same way, if they're gonna get banned here, they're gonna come to another village with the same project. They're probably not even gonna change things around because they didn't even try to change things around here. They had 6 months to do this. So in 6 months, they have not addressed. All they did, they cut off part of their building. So they did not take a single cut to actually sustain our village. So will the flooding issue be addressed with some sort of funds that are going to be set aside? Because we already have past experience with the shops, and we as Meadow Lake are left alone. The village is not there to help us. The village said, sorry, we learned our mistake. So you said you learned your mistake. How exactly did you learn? Did you learn in a way that we're going to have a set fund? Because we would like that fund, and that fund should cover the future, and maybe the developer, the one you want to approve or you don't want to approve, maybe you should make the actual builder to set the fund aside for all of us. I don't know how you want to handle this, but I don't want to be responsible for my house flooding, because if my house will start flooding, who will want to buy my house? So their development will maybe not going to decrease the price of my house right now because they are going to be selling it for higher cost. So considering it's a $500,000 they want to make a townhouse, our housing, maybe it's not going to get as affected. However, in 10 years, if you have higher flooding issue, it will be affected. And none of you are going to be there. You're going to say, well,
Could I just ask you to sum up, because we understand you're very much opposed to the project.
I did not stop you a single time when you were talking, and I would like to continue talking and for you to be respectful of citizens, the same way as you've given Lexington to talk for so many months, for so many hours, wasting our time into the development that is looking as barracks. You have not told them to change it. So I would like to speak my word and have the same right as they have it.
I just ask you to sum up, not to stop.
I would like to speak the way I would like to speak, okay? I would like for them to do their presentations, not an hour and a half and 2 hours and then 6 months increment. So how come I'm taking away the time that I want to explain myself? How am I worse than them? Is it because I'm not bringing money into the village? But I am bringing money. I'm paying my taxes on time.
Okay, let's hear what else you have to say.
So I would like to say that I wish for our village to protect us as citizens, the ones who are already here, and to actually protect our village as well. Because this is not just us you're talking about. You're opening those doors to everybody else. So just if you're trying to grasp to this Lexington developer, what's stopping from other developers to come in and to do the same thing? Or to actually do better, because Lexington in their history, if you look at the developments they have done, have not built anything but cookie cutters. Not a single thing have they done to actually accommodate the place, the residents where they're building. I do not see this development as our image, as the village where we moved, where we live with pride, what our kids love, where they want to be raised, and hopefully want to raise their kids eventually. So if you would want, as the commissioners, just look at it in a way as us, as the ones who are next door to this, and as future residents in our village. Our village is beautiful and it should continue staying that way. And if they want to build here, I have nothing against it. but accommodate in a way where everything else in the village looks. Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak? Okay, I think we've concluded the visitors addressing.
Is there anything else that the developer wants to put into the record before we close the hearing and start discussing?
If I could, I'd like to respond to some of the comments that were made and make it, if that'd be okay.
It's up to the chair.
I think that, well, first I just want to say that I think that the majority of the issues that have been raised are really for the village to resolve. Because as I said earlier, whether or not a fence goes in, it's not really the developer's issue. The developer, I've never had a home builder or developer client who wasn't willing to put in a fence if that's what the village wanted. The same thing with respect to the path. That got put in because of prior comments that were made about pedestrian access around the property, recreational amenities, so that got put in. If the village determines through a plan commission recommendation or village board vote that you don't want the path in through the woodlands, that's fine. One of the members of the public, I think it was Mr. Eisenstein, talked about the landscaping that was shown in the original plan up at the north end of the property to separate this development from Meadow Lake. He is correct. The first plan had that. As you recall, the first plan also called for eliminating about 80% of the woodland, and we asked for the village to consider an amendment to the text of the woodland protection ordinance so that that would be possible, and we were told that wasn't going to happen. So we thought we were doing the right thing by coming back with a plan that preserved 80% plus of the woodland. So again, if the village thinks that, or the village decides that it's better to eliminate the woodland and figure out a way to do that, to put in new landscaping to separate the two communities, that's a decision I think the village should make. The developer would be happy to supplement the woodland with landscaping if the village ecologist says that's a good thing to do and a right thing to do. I don't think that would be a problem, but I think that's requires discussion with the village ecologist. But one other thing we've heard multiple times, not just tonight, but in prior meetings, concern about the impact of this development on the schools, even though we've provided customary demographic information that says that this community will not generate a lot of students. I know multiple times people have made reference to Deerfield High School. I'm assuming that the elementary kids from Meadow Lake go to Deerfield School, District 109. So just for the record, this property is not even in that district. If this development does generate any kids, these kids will go to Aptekissick School District 102 and Stevenson High School. Let's see what else. I think that's it.
I have looked at that. Yeah, it is true. It is true.
This property is in the other districts. Let's see. You can look up the tax bill.
I think what happened is years ago, Meadow Lake particularly petitioned to be included in 109. There was some history that goes way back in there, but
I think that's it. So thank you very much. We look forward to your further consideration.
Yeah, I'll entertain a motion to close the hearing unless any commissioner has.
I motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed.
all right. So at this point, we've stopped taking testimony. We have sort of the record, and it's up to the Plan Commission to formulate a recommendation. The Plan Commission can recommend to the board to grant the relief that was requested. It can vote to recommend denying all the relief, or it can vote to recommend granting some of the relief or the relief with conditions. So that's summarized.
Before we get there, Bruce, how do we go about addressing Lori's issue about affordable housing?
Well, you can explore it in terms of the condition. In other words, if you want to suggest to the board that the affordable housing component should be a certain type of component, we can, I have many pens, and we can just keep expanding the conditions as much as you want. I mean, that's totally up to you guys. So everybody, so if you want me to just run through this, all this memo does is lay out, yep, all this memo does is, this is from, I just took this out of an earlier memo to the Plan Commission from a month and a half ago. It just lays out the grounds for relief. And if you recommend those grounds, it then says that the property would be constructed and operated subject to the following conditions. And there's, you know, a beginning list of 8 conditions. Oh, 7. You know, that's Roman numerals for you. Yeah, it's 7. But I miscounted the number of conditions. But this was just an off the top. I was just riffing with conditions based on comments that we've had at the meetings and.
So this, just for example, if this says, I just randomly looked at it, the project shall satisfy the requirements.
Steve, could you talk into the mic, please?
Well, it was a secret. I didn't want anyone else to hear me. No.
So there's a condition says the village shall satisfy the requirements of the village's affordable housing plan.
So my question is, this is a operational question. We don't have to vote on every one of these things. We can vote on this as a group. Is that correct?
You can vote to grant the relief requested. That's A, B, and C. Do you see the motions? And then you can have 1 or 2 or 8 or 20 conditions.
Right.
These are suggestive because of things that we know have already been discussed. And for example, where it says that the project would satisfy the requirements of the village's affordable housing plan, then you're free to say, in particular, the project will. We recommend that the project should do the following. We recommend that the village board consider the following.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
We feel strongly that the village board should do the following. This is your product. I mean, the starting point is how the Plan Commission feels about the overall petition at this point. And if the Plan Commission says we're not interested in recommending approval at all, then that's the first order to get to.
That's why that was why I was asking my question, because I think it's pretty clear we can make like a general movement, a motion, and then we come back and go through the other ones. I hate to think how long that would take for us to go through.
Well, as I said, the traditional, methodology is you can recommend approval, you can recommend denial, or you can recommend approval with conditions.
I'd like to recommend approval with conditions.
And I mean, what conditions would you like to?
I don't know which conditions.
Okay. So, I mean, I can go through what we put here as a starting point. This was just a starting point. We did this a month and a half ago, so there's been more testimony. There've been other things. We didn't address offense. We didn't address other things in here because, you don't know which way the discussion will go. I mean, we can start reading through these one by one and see how they. You want to do that? Go through the possible conditions?
Yeah.
Okay. So assuming that there is a recommendation to grant relief by adopting the text amendment, rezoning the property to 1R, approving the preliminary subdivision plat, and recommending the granting of a special use for multiple family dwellings, the conditions would then be first that the project be constructed in accordance with the development plan. consisting of all the documents enumerated in the, basically in the petitioner's submittals that are now on the website, as the same may be revised before issuing a final building permit. All revisions have to be consistent with the development plan and approved by the Board of Trustees. We put that in any special use ordinance. We say, basically, when we approve a special use, we approve it with reference to a particular set of plan documents. So your recommendation in the first item, the first condition is just our standard. There's going to be a detailed project list of all the documents, and the approval that we're granting is for that particularly described project, not for something general. It would be that project.
Let me ask another question. Can we come back and revisit things that aren't on here right now? Like next?
Well, if you want to get out with this now, tonight, you would vote tonight with all these conditions.
Right.
If you want to recommend to the board, they think of other things, you can supplement your report. The board it's going to take the board some time to digest this. They're going to make a presentation and everyone's going to have an opportunity to address the board. So if you want to do a supplemental report to the board, there's no reason the board can't take that as well. In other words, if you think of something after tonight, I don't think the board is going to say we're not interested in what you thought of. We're meeting again, I think, May 4th. So the second condition was that the access road be dedicated to the village per the subdivision plat. All public and infrastructure improvements will be assured by completion security. Well, again, that's standard. We require that. The project shall comply with the requirements of the Woodland Protection Ordinance. Again, if you wanted to add a recommendation to supplement landscaping in any particular way, you could do it here. The project shall satisfy the requirements of the village's affordable housing plan. If you wanted to supplement this to pick up your preference for how many on-site units or your preference what the fee in lieu should be as a recommendation to the board, appended here. The next condition was the project shall satisfy the requirements of the Lake County Watershed Development Ordinance as enforced by the village. Goes without saying that it has to do that. The next condition was a homeowner's declaration of covenants to provide for the perpetual care and maintenance of the common areas and improvements, including the engagement of a qualified ecological contractor to maintain native planting, shall be submitted and approved by the village and recorded before issuance of a certificate of occupancy. That's, again, what I was describing before. The final condition was that the project shall grant easements to Lake County and the village for compensatory storage. In other words, they're not only constructing it, but either the plat of subdivision or there might be a separate plat has to establish the easements to maintain the comp storage. The county requires it. We probably will as well, since we'll have a road going through there. I have a couple more copies if anyone wants this. Yeah, I made some more. This was contained in a memo to the Plan Commission like a month and a half ago. It's still on the website, I think.
Do you think, should we just kind of discuss the overall picture here? I mean, I'm just going to kind of ramble for a minute, but we're all residents of Riverwoods on the Plan Commission. We're all volunteering to be here, and the theory behind that is, you know, we have some interest and care about the direction in which the village goes with regards to what is built in the village, right? I mean, when we look at this proposal, we have right now what's essentially, you know, vacant land. I mean, it's owned. It, in theory, Federal Life could reoccupy it or, you know, repurpose it. But in all, you know, practically it's vacant. I mean, they're trying to get rid of it. They're not going to occupy it. So something has to happen. I think the proposal that Lexington has made is pretty responsible. They have started at a place where, you know, the first time I saw their presentation, I was like, it's just nowhere close to what would even be considered by anybody, any average person in Riverwoods. And where we've gotten now compared to where we started, I think it speaks to Lexington. There's a lot of work that was put into that, both through redesign, spending time with residents, coming to plan commission meetings and continuing to present, taking notes at these meetings and returning, having responded to those notes, either with design or with, some data studies. They know what they're talking about. They know what they're doing. I think it's really important for us to listen to the people that live in Riverwoods because that's us. Not just Meadow Lake. Obviously, people in Meadow Lake feel extremely passionately about this, but really anybody in Riverwoods should care about this to some extent. Because I think a couple people mentioned today, but maybe this is precedent setting and maybe this is something we address again in my neighborhood or Carl's neighborhood or Lori, So in a big picture sense, it is important to listen to the comments from the residents because that's us, but it's hard to appease everybody. And even tonight, some of the comments I heard tonight, some of the comments contradicted themselves to a certain extent. I heard a comment tonight about how every home in Riverwoods is unique and different, but then, a couple of minutes later within that same comment was the homes should be built to match what the homes in Riverwoods look like. And to me, it's like, it's so subjective. You're never really going to accomplish that. They could come back every month. And if they come back every month, there's always going to be some piece of the design that is not acceptable to somebody. And to me, I think this is just me speaking, but in my head, there was a comment in October and November, the gentleman that made it is here now. And he said something to the effect of like, what about Riverwoods how does this fit in Riverwoods? Why Riverwoods? And to me, Lexington isn't really doing anything wrong. In fact, I think their presentation is very, very good. And I think it's a tough call for me because I think it's so good that really there's no reason not to approve and advocate it, but it just, for some reason for me, it just doesn't fit. And I'm thinking about if this development were to be built next door to my home, would I be in favor of it or not? And I'm not sure that I would be. In fact, I don't think that I would be. So it's a very tough call, I think. Not just the relief and the language within the village code, but also just from a kind of a responsibility to the village and the residents within the village of what the character of the village is. So I said I was going to ramble. That's it.
I could ramble too, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I've watched this development go from so dense that it made me want to vomit to a lot better than it was when it was originally presented. I've looked at this property with the question of what possible uses could be made on this property. So first I looked at, what I'd really like to see is single family homes because that's my community and that's what I love. But the site is not conducive to single family homes, especially with the widening of Deerfield Road and the CubeSmart and the gas station and the restaurant, the things that surround it on all the sides except on the north, make it truly not conducive to single family homes. So I walked away from single family homes and then I thought, well, we could have a nice little shopping center, a nice clean little shopping center, really cute. I've seen some beautiful things that have been done recently, except that brick and mortar stores are all going away and we know that online is taking over our retail and there are very few new retail stores starting and succeeding. Do we want a restaurant area with, well, that entails cooking smells and traffic and night stuff and bars and lots of things that I don't think Meadow Lake would love having next to them. So then I come down to what do we do that's best for our community? And I think you all know, if you've listened to me over all of these meetings, that that's what's most important to me. And I think that the introduction of a townhouse community is not a bad use for that site. And I think that it's gone a long way toward what I'd like to see. Would I love to see something that was very creative? Would I love to see fronts that were different on every building and charming? This is not charming. This is very structured and commercial. And yes, the landscaping is much nicer now, and there is more green space than there was, which I very much appreciate. But again, I think, where are the kids going to play? There's no place for the kids to play in this development. And if we said, okay, there aren't going to be that many kids living there, 4 kids need to play just as much as 40 do. So those are the deficits. And I am torn between what I'd love to see there and what is feasible. Okay, now I finished rambling.
I mean, we're not really designing the project. As a plan commission, you know, we have ordinances, and, you know, there's a structure to what we're doing. There's always things that we would like to see. And I completely agree with Sherry with what she's saying. So that's the tough part of this is, do I like the way it looks? I mean, I don't know, not necessarily, but to what level do we, you know, how much can we influence the redesign of a project if it meets the criteria that we're asking for from an applicant for a piece of property in a private sale?
No, I'm going to actually, I'll actually answer a question on this too. So I live in Thorngate, okay? And right now we know what's going on across the street, and that's not good. So then I think about this is, how many times have we looked at this location and tried to put something there? That's my question. How many times have we done this? A lot, right? And here we go. I mean, I think Lexington did a great job of their presentation. They really buffed it up. And it makes me think that what else can we get there? How many times are we going to do this? And this is just my thoughts on this. And what if it's the next one is worse? So I look at, it's hard to make that decision. I'm going to be very honest, but I think when you look at everything, and I understand that we're all here and we're trying to appease everybody, it's hard. It's hard to do that. I get that. And then I look back at Thorngate, like, look what's happening. Oh my God, we might have our houses go way down, and that scares the heck out of me, right? So I look at this as, I feel like there's going to be not many more opportunities here to make that decision. That's my thoughts. That's where I'm at. So I'm kind of leaning towards yes on this. That's my decision. With, well, obviously conditions, of course, conditions. Yes. Yes.
My biggest concern from the beginning of this has been density. I thought the initial plan was far too much density. I still think that this is too much density. I mean, honestly, I think that this first amendment here we're talking about should take the 7,000 and make it 10,000 feet. The minimum lot area per dwelling should be 10,000 feet. So I think a density of 4 per acre is more appropriate. Having said that,
sorry, I was just going to say I agree with you. I think the density issue is important.
Yeah, I think that's a key issue. And having said that, you know, I appreciate that Lexington has worked with us and done a lot, come a long way, and they've made a lot of changes, very good changes. I still am struggling, though, to accept the density that's in this plan.
Let me ask the Plan Commission a question. On the question of density, most of the communities that develop affordable housing grant a density bonus. I've been saying this to the Plan Commission for a year and a half. We grant a density bonus to accomplish affordable housing. So there is a tension here between saying we really would like less density and also let's address the affordable housing. I can't tell you how to address it, but I can tell you that most communities award density bonuses in order to get affordable housing. So we would be very unusual in wanting to highlight affordable housing as a goal while simultaneously advocating for lower density. It would just not be the way that most communities that I don't know of any community actually that does it that way, but I've said that before. I'll just say it again.
Okay, let me respond to that with my problem with it. The problem with it is, yes, we have a development that's quite dense, offering 3 units of affordable housing. And that's not worth a density bonus of any kind as far as I'm concerned.
Well, you can, in your condition, you can recommend.
Oh, trust me, I will.
That there'll be more on-site affordable housing. You can recommend that.
But see, we can play this balance game. It can go one of 2 ways. It can go, let's reduce the density a little more and we'll let you get away with 3 affordable housing units, or let's not increase the density and then 3 affordable units are not acceptable. And I think that's something that the Plan Commission has to look at because it cuts both ways.
I think we also could step up and do what we want and recommend what we want. What we want more affordable housing, we want less density, and we want it to be more attractive. Why can't we recommend that?
I agree. I mean, I think if you're looking at affordable housing, you'd really have to be blown away by the way affordable housing was highlighted within this project, which is not the case. I don't even think Lexington would argue that what they're really trying to, promote affordable housing. I think they're trying to meet the criteria, and that's it. So for us to kind of say that this is an affordable housing flagship project for us, even if it is maybe the first one, I don't know. I really don't think it is.
Well, and there's one more thing here. We talk about fee in lieu. And it's very nice to say, okay, we're going to give you 3 affordable housing units and 6 more that are fee in lieu or 5 more that are fee in lieu. I don't see another development coming in where we can put 5 more affordable units. And if that's the case, what good does it do us to have fee in lieu?
Well, I did talk with Rob Anthony at Community Partners. His suggestion was that we accumulate funds and that we look at subsidizing a single family home in the village. He thought that it would be nice to have another type of housing available for an affordable family. And he would be happy to enforce the affordable restrictions on that property as well. So he could think of other uses. He started looking at houses in the village. He found one right off the bat that was a 2-bedroom, 2-bath house just on Deerfield Street. So you're free to, you can recommend less density and more affordable housing, but I feel like I should at least say to you as a body that there are economic realities to developing projects. And so if the village wants to encourage the inclusion of affordable housing, in order to do so, most other villages think of ways to incentivize that because it's expensive. It's hard to accomplish. And if the developer, this wasn't their desires. We told them we have an affordable housing requirement. Please try and meet it. I should point out that I did have a conversation with Community Partners. That's the organization in Highland Park that's been doing so much. And the director told me that they would be pleased to administer the affordable housing restrictions for the village as they do for the Highland Park Housing Commission. And so they have the set of restrictive covenants and everything that they work for some time now in Highland Park. They said, if you just mark them up for Riverwoods, we would be happy to do the same thing for you that they were doing for Highland Park. So I actually felt like after that conversation that there was, at least administratively, a way to accomplish this. And in terms of other possibilities, there are other parcels in the village that office parcels in the future that could become the site of, housing. It would most likely be multifamily of some sort. So we've gotten requests to consider a multifamily housing on the land use parcel.
On which parcel?
The landfill parcel, the 37 acres. So they haven't come to fruition yet, but I guess, it's so hard to get affordable units that if you get 3 or 5 or 7 to say we shouldn't even try because it doesn't make a difference. I mean, we would say that forever. I mean, we have to start someplace, and the first 3 or 4 won't move the needle. It'll take a while, but if we just say that it's an insignificant number because we're not getting, we'll never, I mean, that's our plan.
That's not what I said, though.
I know.
I said balance here,
Yeah. I mean, and Lori has brought up several times, shouldn't they provide more on-site? One of the issues is how many on-site units makes for a manageable private association. And on the other hand, what is an appropriate fee in lieu? We looked up that the fee in lieu in Highland Park is now $175,000. So
in Highland Park, it's 175. They've asked for 125.
So all of these things are within your purview to decide or not.
I mean, for me, affordable housing is important, but it's just not the main consideration here. I mean, I feel like we're enclosed, right? So I feel like—
You understand, this is just for the Plan Commission's point. We've closed the hearing. No, we've closed the hearing. This is just discussion among the Plan Commission. Okay, we need to conduct our business. So it's okay.
We had a couple hours of open discussion before this. So I guess to me, Riverwoods is the only community I can think of in this area that does not have any kind of multi-family housing. And the first time, whether it's this year or in 5 years or in 20 years, the first time that it happens, I think it's really important as far as a precedent for the village, for the residents, not just from what's on paper, but just the feel of the project. We're different than the other communities. I mean, people think of Riverwoods as, oh, that's the place with all the woods and minimum 1 acre lots. It's just different than Highland Park. It's different than Lincolnshire. It's different. So this project really, it's hard for Lexington in some ways because it's the first one. If this was the third multifamily in the village, there'd be a couple of, we'd have a lot of precedent. We'd just be able to follow down the path that was already created. It'd be a lot easier. The first one is the hardest because it's got to make people really feel comfortable that this fits the character of Riverwoods. Really, maybe more so than a standard that you would have to meet in another village. And the character issue is big. I mean, people have said, what about this fits within the character of Riverwoods since the first meeting through tonight. And I think just as a resident, that's important. When you say where you live and what are the couple things that are special about your town, it's a lot of it has to do with the character of the town. So the standard and the standard is high and the design is good, but I just don't know if it's good enough. I don't know if it's good enough for me.
And say, don't forget that one of the potential uses of this is to let senior citizens move back into Riverwoods when they leave Riverwoods, which is a desirable thing that for 20 years. The mayor from 20 years ago was trying to promote that too. We can get it so if someone wants to be by their family, they can move into a townhouse. It's not always like a primary type of residence.
One of the long-term challenges that a lot of villages are facing, I live in a different community. I'm active in the Plan Commission in that community. Communities are trying to get a variety of types of housing. That's one of the goals, even in our comprehensive plan. If you look around nationally, when you talk in planning circles, there's a crisis in housing. There's not enough units. And so I know it's special that we have large lots and single-family zoning. I've labored to preserve that environment for years, you know, in my role here. But it's not to say as if that philosophy hasn't come under some criticism in the larger conversation about the responsibility of communities to allow for a variety of housing types and to encourage construction of housing. That is happening all around the country. So, and I mention it because as a legal matter, we have a responsibility in our zoning and our comprehensive plan to be responsive to some of these needs. It's, there's not a lot of support for the idea that a community is entitled to have only single-family zoning. And I think that when multifamily housing was included in the 1R district, it was recognized at the time that there was a deficiency to have a zoning code that had not one speck of multifamily housing anywhere in the village. So what we're used to in the village is a high standard and a certain, we're used to a very low density, but other observers from the outside wouldn't necessarily look at our allegiance to that at all costs and say that should carry the day for any new development. There's, you know, if we get a proposal on another one of these sites, it won't be at 4 units per acre. If you look at comparable densities around us, so we don't have to match comparable densities. We get to take into account the character of the village, but in all of our conversation, I think it would be a mistake not to recognize that there is a broad conversation nationally about housing, how many units are getting built. And it's something that even in our comprehensive plan that we talk about a little bit. So it's just another element in the balancing here.
I mean, you're right. And I agree. I think multifamily housing is coming. And even when you listen to the comments from the public tonight, you hear people that have been here, like Christy has been to every single one of these meetings. She's invested a lot of time into this issue. She's written some very detailed and well-researched correspondence to us. She said she's not against multifamily housing of some sort, but this doesn't feel like the right one. And maybe it's an unfair standard for Lexington because they are the first. So everybody's getting used to this idea. And instead of, you know, if this was project number 3, we might all be saying, wow, we're lucky to have somebody that's putting so much time and effort into working with the ecologists and trying to meet some of the standards in the comprehensive plan. But it's not number 3, it's number 1. So we have nothing to compare it to. So maybe the next project will be, you know, a square building with 500 units in a small footprint, but you know, we don't know. What we have in front of us right now is what we have, and it's really good. I mean, I really think they've done a really strong, responsible job of responding to traffic, to photometrics, to school impacts, drainage. I mean, it's almost like what else could you ask for? But then you look at just what it looks like and what Riverwoods is, and I don't know.
Well, I'm not hearing that anybody is against the concept of multifamily here. I don't think, and I'm not hearing that. I mean, we haven't voted, I'm not hearing that. So what would it take to approve a project? What would you suggest that we do? Or anybody. I mean, I don't want to put Jay on the spot, but you know. Lower density?
Density for me makes a big difference. I think that's a fundamental characteristic of the village. It's hard to let that go. And I say that even though Lexington's proposal meets the standard of density that we have in our village. So it's kind of like I'm contradicting myself.
Let me ask you this. If they just got rid of a building, the density would go down. It seems somewhat arbitrary to say the development now succeeds because they've just taken away 5 units. It just seems arbitrary, right? So then instead, possibly one of the things to consider is that the cost of construction is quite high, and that the custom homes that we see on single-family lots are very expensive, and that what we're sort of wondering here is how do we get to a more custom-looking development at a price point of $500,000 per unit. Now, I don't know what would be involved in achieving that, but I think simply pulling a density number, that wouldn't accomplish the design objection you have, just to say to, change one building. And part of, as it's been explained to us, part of the layout is that way because of the efficiencies in construction, the way utilities are double loaded on units, how it's shared. So
they're using the impervious space that's there already, which is efficient. And I don't think just chopping off a building makes a difference. I mean, what's the difference between one more or one less? It's the same conceptual project.
So I would say if you're saying density, then you really are coupling with that, which you want something other than this development. But then I think I would say consider what is a development that at this price point that's possible with, what are you thinking of? Well,
affordable. Yeah.
Maybe they're bigger, more expensive houses, bigger footprints, lower, make it look more like Riverwoods.
But then, that gets us back to where we are as plan commissioners, where how much sway do we have in the design? If they are asking for relief, we either say yes or no based on the language.
Yeah, I think if you vote to recommend approval with conditions, your conditions can't be, we'd like to approve it, but completely redesign it. I don't think that's a typical condition.
And the bottom line is, no matter what this comes out as, there are people who are going to be happy with it, and there are people who are going to be unhappy with it. Unfortunately, while I was violently opposed to this development when it was first presented, the more I look at the site, the more this looks like the only kind of development that will work on that site. And there are people, and one of the things that I love is that they added to the plans the potential for an elevator for people who are, for example, am handicapped, and I could never make it up to a third floor unless you had a hoist and a lift in the building and pick me up there. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to do it. And where I want to get out of my house and retire to a place that was maintained, this would be an impossibility for me unless there was an elevator. And that has been added. And that was one of the things that wasn't there when I first saw the plans that I appreciate. I think to a great extent, the developer has tried to satisfy the needs of the public. I don't believe that there is any way, shape, or form that there's going to be a meeting of the minds between this development and between the residents. Do I think it's potentially the best thing we're going to get? They have worked so hard to answer our questions, and they have worked so hard to satisfy our requirements, that I'm not certain that there's anything better that can come along. And again, you look at this and you say, we have these criticisms, but we don't know what comes next. And it's not our property. We don't own it. And basically, I'm uncomfortable saying to the seller, you can't sell to anybody because we don't like any of the things that are coming in there potentially. I don't think that's my place to say. Would I like a little bit of differentiation in the front of these buildings so that they don't all look like they've been rubber stamped out of a whatever? Yeah, I would. And whether that is, it doesn't have to be major, whether it would be landscaping differentiation, whether it would be planters on the buildings, whether it would be differentiation in color so that it doesn't look so same. I think that would make me a little more comfortable. Do I like the path? I love walking paths. I think it's a mistake to put it there. I think that exposes Meadow Lake to every single person who's going to use it because you're right there. And I don't think that works. So no, in any other circumstance, I would say the best thing you can do is have a nice mulch walking path that's not impervious, that people can use and they can get out. In this case, in that location, it bothers me, it concerns me. So I have my concerns, I do. On the other hand, I don't know that we can do better.
With the changes that have been made, the footprint's not too bad. Overall, the concern is the density. So, Lori, I think you suggested that maybe the units could be bigger and fewer units, and that would bring the density down.
So where do we go?
Yeah, where do we go?
So, the proposal is what it is. If the Cinnamon is to recommend denial, then that's a motion. If the Cinnamon is to recommend approval or approval with conditions, those are, your choices. I mean, at this point, to say to the developer, we like it, but come back with fewer units, but bigger units, I mean, that's starting over. Because, we don't know what the economics are. We don't know what the target audience are. We don't know how, that's not, the units that they've proposed since day one have been units that are 1,600 feet or 2,200. They've been approximately the same unit. You correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a reason for that. There's a cost per square foot to build a unit. When you take that cost per square foot times that, you come up at $500,000, and you have a price point for a target market that you know pretty well. So,
also to echo your point, I mean, it's probably going to look very similar from the exterior if we're going bigger units and less of them.
That's not going to change.
But maybe not. I mean, it's a complete.
I think if you say that, then I think what you're recommending is to deny this proposal, but to tell the village board that you would welcome a proposal but would it be the same footprint, just larger units? But in other words, that goes back to my other question. It wouldn't change. What if the units, the buildings, the footprint was all the same? It's just you had fewer units. Does that really change anything?
No.
So what are you really trying to get at?
It's the same.
What are you really trying to get at?
Well, and especially if we're saying this is for people who want to downsize, the minute you make it bigger, then you're no longer talking about people who want to downsize, people who want to move into a maintained community. The public that is the customer of a townhouse development. The minute you start making them bigger and say, okay, they're going to be $750,000 units and we're going to have to be 3,200 square feet. My house is smaller than that and I wouldn't be moving. So I think that puts them out of the market if you were to say that. I don't think that would work. And it still has the same footprint. It still has the same building density, although the population density is done. And if you do that, you're going to have twice as many kids. So, it's all give and take in every direction. I kind of think that this is as good as we're going to get in that area with some limitations. One of them that bothers me is that there's not enough affordable housing there, and that does bother me. But with those kinds of limitations, and again, I'm opposed to the path, but I don't know if anybody else is. And I'm only opposed to the path because it's great for the residents there, but it's not great for Meadow Lake.
We haven't talked about other conditions. What about requiring more native infill in the woodland area? I mean, maybe we don't do a fence, but there's more native trees put in there in consultation with the village ecologist.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would address a concern we heard from people over the past few months.
Well, I think the woodland area, the area north of the Northwest Pond, definitely the landscaping there needs to be augmented. But the woodland area is really what we didn't want them to mess with. So, but the woodland area, and the only area between the woodland area and the buildings is the outflow area. So I don't know that there's too much they can do in terms of landscaping there.
I mean, we can recommend that be considered, enhancement of additional plantings to provide buffering. You don't have to solve the problem. You can just recommend that
With
be
the
considered.
consultant of the ecologist.
With the village ecologist.
Absolutely.
That is a condition that I would recommend strongly, is that the woodland area be enhanced with natives. Plus, I think natives should be a priority in the plantings, in the manicured landscaping. I mean, it's not been excluded, but I think it should be a priority. We could recommend no path.
Clearly.
I mean, if we make these recommendations, do you feel differently about approving the motions?
I would, I think. I
If we have enough conditions, will we be satisfied to approve the application?
I think so, because I've got to tell you, I am impressed with the work that they have done in answering our questions all along. They've really, really, really worked hard at it. It's far from perfect and it's far from wonderful, but they have done as much as more than I expected them to do to answer our questions up to now. So with conditions, depending upon what those conditions are, I would consider approval.
Others? Jay, you have some further thoughts? Steve?
Considering it without the path, is that what you're saying?
Well, we will have to talk about what the conditions would be. There'd be a list of them, and we'll talk about it right now.
Well, this is back to my original question, the conditional approval. I mean, I would conditionally approve the whole list of things.
Right.
And they can be reviewed. And we can also add in other things like, the trustees are going to conclude this conversation.
Right. This is our recommendation to the board. So we should talk about a list of conditions, more conditions than have been presented so far. So I would say that one condition must be to maximize the native plants in the manicured landscaping, not just have them, but maximize it. I would also say, in consultation with the village ecologist, to
beef up the woodland,
to enhance with native plantings the woodland area, the buffer area in the north.
Okay, I'm writing this down.
increase the number of housing units.
Definitely increase the number of affordable housing units.
Yes.
And what do we think about payments in lieu? If it's 6 units, then it's 2 in lieu.
Well, if it's 6 and it's 2 in lieu, I'm sure that at some point the village can find a place for that. If it's 3 units and 6 in lieu, I'm not so sure.
No, it would be 3 and 5.
3, okay. I never was very well at math. I mean,
15% is
guys.
8 units.
But if it was increased and the number that were in lieu was decreased, I might be able to say, okay, that's fine. But 3 is not enough.
Do we have a number that we're comfortable with? Should we say 6?
5 or I could
6?
live with 5.
5 or 6 and an increased payment in lieu.
Correct.
Which should be determined by an expert because
yeah,
I don't think we know the number.
I can't even hit 3 and 5, so don't worry about me.
Well, it's based on calculations and they're pretty complicated from what I've read. How about we recommend no path?
I would recommend no.
No path?
You like the path? It's very close to the residences though, and it brings the townhouse residents right up against Meadow Lake, and that's why I don't like it. We want to protect those homes. We want to protect those residents and their privacy.
Then those neighbors are going to walk in our neighborhood because you're taking months. So we're back to square one from where it started. And we are back in our neighborhood, walking their dog, walking their kids, taking bikes. So all of that is also taken, it's a double negative.
I don't know if we have to deal with the path as part of the conditions.
We won't.
That can be-
Ask the board to,
Yeah,
consider.
and that can be reviewed by the-
ramifications of having
Let
a path
the
or
board
fence.
decide that.
Consider the fencing.
Yeah, let's move on.
You could just mention to the board that you should continue to consider the ramifications of a fence and.
A fence and path.
I mean, that's almost a Meadow Lake and developer issue,
Exactly.
But then again, there is the fact that the fence will block the movement of wildlife through that area. which
Definitely,
is
the
not
fence is
good.
not,
Continue exploring desirability of fence.
fence is not appealing.
Well, I just said, as a recommendation, board, continue exploring the desirability of a fence. They can, what else did we,
Okay.
and removing the path along the north buffer. Along the north buffer, to address the concerns of the Meadow Lake community. And let them continue to debate it.
Yeah.
And they will.
Removing the path, I said, along the north buffer, through the woodlands.
Through the woodland.
And over the hill.
Now, I think we're not going to discuss short-term rental tonight.
No, well,
Just-
we haven't, I haven't,
Throw that in.
I will just summarize what has been said here, but we haven't had a motion yet, so.
No, we haven't.
I move that. I move that
This motion,
this motion,
these approvals with these conditions.
yeah, this conditional approvals.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
All right. So Steve is moving the recommendation to the village board that the text amendment as proposed be adopted, and that
Additional approvals.
the subject property would be rezoned to the 1R district, the preliminary plat be approved, and a special use be granted for multiple family dwellings, subject to the conditions on the sheet that you have that as amended as follows. In condition number 4, the project shall satisfy the requirements of the village's affordable housing plan. However, the Plan Commission recommends 5 to 6 units should be on site, and the fee in lieu should be as recommended by a knowledgeable consultant, the fee in lieu amount. And then condition number 8, Roman numeral 8 is added. Maximize native plantings in the manicured areas and in consultation with the village ecologist, enhance the northern buffer area. And then new condition number 9, continue exploring the desirability of a fence and removing the path along the north buffer through the woodlands to address the concerns of the Meadow Lake community.
Are there any other?
I can make a copy of this and forward it to you. I can't believe that. I can't believe that I did such a thing. So that's your motion.
And I will second that motion.
I guess it's
Any more
time.
discussion,
Yeah,
comments?
is there any more discussion, comments, additional conditions that you want to put in?
You know what, we should have this, they say, subject to the possibility that there may be additional conditions after consideration by the
I
plan
like
commission.
that. Yeah, I
How
like
about
that.
that?
Yeah, condition that there may be
Leave that
more
door open.
commission. Yeah, okay.
Was that, show you.
That there may be additional conditions from the plan commission,
Oh,
Yeah, so we leave it open,
that's good.
because it is late.
because we're all have to sleep.
Yes, it's late.
It's my bedtime.
Well, the Plan Commission may forward additional suggested conditions in a supplemental report if it thinks necessary.
Oh, God, you do that.
But that's what I get paid for.
So are we ready for a vote?
I think so.
Is it a roll call vote or is it?
Yes, it has. It should be a roll call vote. So this vote is a recommendation. The Plan Commission is an advisory body, and the Plan Commission summarizes this recommendation to the village board, and then the matter goes to the village board, where it is practically, but
There'll be another meeting where we see how they address those conditions. Public actually sees them, or we will not see them, and they will, as long as they satisfy them, then it just gets pushed to the trustee's office. Because so far,
the trustees will ask for what they would like to see, and I'm sure they will ask for a presentation by them, and it'll be at a public meeting.
what I want to ask is, or it pushes to the trustees meeting, we see us over here.
The materials that they submit, that they're going to present to the board, they probably will have to get to the board in advance of the board meeting, usually 10 days. So usually those will be available.
And it will be here at the same place as it is right now.
In this room,
Only to push
but
trustees afterwards.
to the village board,
At a plan commission meeting.
but not another Plan Commission meeting.
So that's what I mean. So right now, we're going to create whatever the conditions that you're saying, and then it gets pushed.
To the village board.
Exactly. So as of right now, they haven't satisfied.
Right.
But you're already ready to approve them to move on to the next step. So how come they're not?
Okay. We're in the middle. But this is,
You know, we've gone over these procedures for the last 6 months, probably at every meeting. I know you mentioned that you haven't been able to attend all of the meetings, but right now is not the appropriate time to get a. So that basically the Plan Commission can't solve every problem and doesn't try to. When it gets to a point where it thinks it can make a recommendation and put an issue to the village board, it says, okay, we've debated this enough. We're going to move it to the village board and let them, and this is what the conditions say, continue to debate and explore this, because we're just an advisory body anyway. The final decision is going to be made by the village board.
As of right now, the density is not addressed, and this is final.
That's the motion. Okay. You want to call the question?
Yes.
And it's already being pushed away from the public.
It goes to the village board, who is composed of your elected officials, and we are not. We're just appointed and we're advisory.
Absolutely. So then why don't you, as our representatives, tell them that these are the conditions in under which we will push you farther when you actually do show us
Because
that you want to take care of this.
Because this Plan Commission has already reached that point that it's willing to send this to the board. But these people have decided that they're ready to do that. That's why they're voting now.
This is not in your backyard, right? Because if you would have been one of us, you would have been looking at this. You would have not been looking at it. So if you look at a vote, like you're voting right now, vote as if it was your backyard, not as if it's just the village. And then vote as a second, and you ask yourself, as a citizen of this village, would you see this type of?
Okay, you've got to call the question.
Yes, we hear you.
Why haven't they done this? Why does other developers,
We got to go.
different developers, they could have presented us different way of them looking. Instead, they continue with the same exact designs that they're used at many other villages.
I hear you, and I really hope that you come to the village board and say all of those things again with the equal amount of passion that you're saying it right now. Well, we hear you, but it's time for us to take our vote. I appreciate your input, though. All your input, I appreciate. All right, I'm ready to call the question.
Commissioner Blaylock,
Aye.
Commissioner Dot,
Does it have to be unanimous?
No, it's just a
No.
majority vote.
You get to vote however you want.
You want us to come back to you? Yes. Sure.
Commissioner Gratiter, Commissioner Levin,
Aye.
Commissioner Rothbard,
Aye.
Commissioner Dot,
Vote your heart.
Vote how you feel.
Nay.
and Chairperson Brightcoff.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, thank you very much.
That was tough.
We will move the new business to,
We won't deal with short-term
not going to do short-term rentals tonight. We'll move it to our May 4th meeting.
You need a motion to?
Yes, no comments by the chairman, and I will entertain a motion.
I'll tell you.
Commissioners, I need a motion to adjourn, please. Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Nicely run meeting. It was very challenging.
Thank you. I'm tired.
I'm really tired. After a Tuesday night and tonight,